This is Rio, and he became the strongest guy in the world without anyone knowing. Reincarnated from another world by an angelic being who granted him water magic and a hidden ability, immortality. He spent 20 years on the mountain, training water magic, becoming an OP mage. He faced all kinds of monsters, a giant snake, a killer eagle, and even an undead knight the size of an abyss. One day while walking on the beach, he finds 3 people lying unconscious. He rescues them and uses his water magic inside their bodies and save their lives. Now he decides to leave this island and go live in the outside world. On a phone call, Rio hears that he must remain calm and pay attention, with it being explained that the call was about the death of his parents. The boy is lying in front of a truck, his consciousness fading as it is said that perhaps everything happened according to destiny. The first thing he felt was not fear of death nor relief, but only a little remorse, even though he did not know why. He also felt a bit of pity for himself because the next day would have been his 20th birthday. Then he ended up in this new world where he discovered new adventures and nothing less than that thing called magic. He crossed swords with a woman and also faced other enemies. In fact, he battled many others, to be honest. But his entire story will be told in due time, especially because the idea of reincarnation should seem like fantasy to us who are reading this story. But for him, it was real. In a completely white room, the boy appears confused when a voice asks him his name is Rio Mihara. It confirms as they mention that they haven't had any visitors in a while and that he died in an accident. A man continues saying that in rare cases, individuals from his Earth are reincarnated or transferred between worlds after they die, which on our planet is called Samsara, and that Rio was the chosen one this time. As the boy remained confused, the man says that the choice is simple, that he can reincarnate in another world with all his memories intact. Surprised, the boy says that it is like reincarnating in an isekai, and the man agrees, saying that it would be a good way to explain the situation. With a thoughtful look, Rio says that he has some questions to ask the man. The first question was whether the man was God, and he denied it, explaining that from the boy's point of view, the man would be like an angel. While digesting the information, the boy thinks that he will call the man False Michael and wonders if his thoughts can be read. The second question was about why he is reincarnating, and the angel says that they are not the ones who make the decisions. What the boy calls God made the decision and did not explain the reason to the angel. The third question was what he should do in his new world, as he was still confused. Kao made the angel explained that he is to live as he wishes and that no instructions were given regarding how the boy should act. Happy with his answer, the boy thinks that one can live any life, that he would live a peaceful life, and therefore accepts the proposal. The angel is pleased that Rio accepted and prepares to tell him about his new world. According to False Michael, the new world was very similar to Earth, but it had magic and gunpowder and firearms were rare. Our protagonist asks if the new world really has magic, and he is told that Earth once also had magic, but today it is no longer practiced. While the boy absorbs the information that Earth once had magic, the angel prepares to show him the new world. A globe appears before the boy while it is announced that the new world is called Phi. Smiling, the angel explains that 1 in every 5 people has an aptitude for magic, and that Rio would have an aptitude for water magic. Disappointed, the boy asks if he can change his aptitude from water to fire or earth. The False Michael says that no changes can be made. And then he explains that magical aptitudes are bestowed by the gods, and that in the new world they are conferred at birth and will never change. Rio then asks if he is stuck with water magic for the rest of his life. With a slight smile, the angel explains that water aptitude is actually very good, since humans cannot live without it. In addition, 8% of humans in Phi cannot use magic, so the boy was very lucky. Rio thinks that humans need water and sodium to survive, and that in a medieval world, not having to worry about water is a great thing. Then, getting an idea, he asks the angel if water magic has healing power, and the angel says healing properties belong to light magic. Disappointed, the boy accepts it. The angel explains elemental magic to the boy and says that there are others that are not elemental, but that it would be better for him to focus on his water magic. Then he explains that the boy's physical abilities are above average and that in Phi the system is not based on levels or skills, but hard work. The boy asks how he can improve his physical and magical abilities. Just like on Earth, and Phi humans can increase their physical abilities by exercising and training. Then the angel ends his speech by saying that if Rio dedicates himself to evolving, he will evolve. Worried, the boy thinks that if he doesn't work really hard, he won't get far in this new world. The narrator says that after a few more explanations, it was time for False Michael to ask what Rio would like to do. Cheerfully, our boy replies that he wants to live a peaceful life in some remote place. Smiling, the angel says he will reincarnate him in the Rondo forest. And he will also leave food supplies for 2 months and tells him to take advantage of the 100-meter barrier around the house, since he will need to learn to use his magic for hunting. Lastly, he says there's a beach to the southwest of the house and that Rio will be able to extract salt from the water once he develops his water magic. Clearly having forgotten to ask the most important question, Rio looks at the angel and asks how to use magic. False Michael says he just needs to clearly visualize the magic and train a lot, since no one is good at it from the start. Our protagonist says he'll do his best and thanks the angel for all his help. And as if in a blink of an eye, Rio finds himself waking up in a bed. The boy begins to get up from the bed in what looks like a rudimentary cabin. As he gets up and leaves the room, he says the cabin looks like something out of the medieval period and doesn't even seem new. Upon leaving the room, he notices a rough table with 2 books on top and some chairs. Our boy ignores the books and begins to explore the rest of the cabin. In one of the rooms, he sees it backed up and remembers that the Romans used public baths and mentally thanks for having one to himself. He then thinks that false Michael must have made it for him because he's Japanese and also realizes he still doesn't know the angel's gender. After a few minutes, he seems to remember the books on the table and goes back to check them. Upon returning, he notices that one book is a compilation about monsters and the other is about local flora. He sees a note signed by false Michael saying that the food is in the silo outside the house, which also serves as a freezer, and realizes he was indeed reading his mind. Rio says to himself that he doesn't have any appraisal skill, a classic Ezukai cliché, and remembers the angel warned him it would be like that. Besides that, he also has a knife. Putting the knife on his belt, he looks around and sees nothing else besides those items, and with that, he prepares to leave the cabin. As he steps outside, he's amazed by the vastness and beauty of the place with a wide open area. Looking at the mountains in the distance, he says that dragons and other types of beasts probably live there, and that it's better to stay away. Then, as he contemplates the landscape, he finally realizes that he really is in another world. Meanwhile, false Michael thinks about how nice it would be if one day he had a physical body and lived a peaceful life like Rio is doing. Right after that, he remembers he forgot to tell him how strong his magic is even by face standards. The angel thinks the boy will notice at some point, and while looking at his screen, he discovers a hidden ability and wonders how it got there. He recalls that the last time he saw this was in a girl, when he first started working in reincarnation 10,000 years ago, and wonders what Rio's ability might be. On his screen, it shows that Rio's hidden ability is eternal youth. Rio thinks that now that he's in his new world of magic and swords, he's eager to test out his new abilities. His water magic is the only skill he can use, and he remembers what false Michael said about visualizing the magic and practicing. Focused on thinking about water, the boy closes his eyes. Surprised, he opens his eyes and sees bubbles of water in front of his raised hands, realizing that it was his first time using magic. Remembering false Michael's lessons and watching his water bubble fall to the ground, he understands that he doesn't need to recite spells and wonders if the laws of physics are the same here. The boy also recalls what the angel said about the barrier, how he should be well prepared for battle before stepping outside its protection. Indeed, he couldn't step beyond the 100 meters of his barrier unless he was well prepared to fight. He would only have 2 months before the food in the silo ran out, and the only weapon false Michael left him was a knife. Even on Earth, it would be impossible to fight a wild boar with just a simple knife, so monsters and fire were completely out of the question. That left Rio with only one other weapon option. While filling his bath cell with water, he thought that Petit in his magic was visualizing in his mind what he wanted. Still deep in thought, he visualizes the phenomenon called hydrogen bonding, because if he understands how what he wants to create works, he just needs to go imagine it. With that, he managed to create a thin lens of water, of ice, and also to boil and unfreeze water. Suddenly, he collapses on the bathroom floor. Exhausted, he realizes that he drained all of his magic. On his 5th day in the world of Phi in the morning, he cooks a rabbit leg to eat. Visiting the silo, he notices that the only seasoning false Michael left for him was salt, along with some kind of magic that keeps the food frozen. Rio had been perfecting his process of thawing and cooking meat excellently. They also have to devour the books left by the angel, which despite being for beginners were dense and lengthy. While eating and reading, the boy thought that he needed to find ways to heal himself, make antidotes, and create fire without needing a blade of water. The sun was setting in the world of Phi. Before sleeping and several times during the day, he would repeat the cycle of creating and melting ice to improve his magical skills. While repeating the cycle again, he says that he can create ice in 5 seconds, but still can't make it fly. However, the water he creates always flies. During the day, Rio collected ingredients he could find within the barrier and went on long runs to strengthen his body and his magic, preparing himself for hunting. And during the nights, he trained his magical abilities continuously, like creating ice and evaporating water. Every day he repeated this training, and with a knife fixed by ice onto a stick, we reached the 13th day of our protagonist in Phi. Looking at magical water bubbles in one hand and the spear made of an ice knife on a stick in the other, he thinks he's managed pretty well with his magic so far. He then begins to think of a good name for his new technique, and the name he comes up with is Ice Spear, even though he still can't make his ice fly. His goals for the day were to find some detoxifying herbs and a stone to use as a fire starter. With determination in his eyes, he gets excited to begin the day and accomplish his goals. Then he takes his first step outside the barrier, armed with his spear. He plans to head southwest, where false Michael said there was a beach. Rio moves through the dark forest, climbing over small rocks and obstacles. Upon leaving the dark forest, he is surprised by the beautiful scenery before him. A lovely river stretches across his entire field of vision on a sunny day. He's amazed by the beauty of the landscape as he reaches the river and decides to descend the mountain he was on. As he descends the mountain, our protagonist notices something on the ground and decides to crouch down for a closer look. Looking more carefully, he sees that he has found quartz, one of his goals for the day. Our boy never imagined it would be so easy to find, and now he won't have any more trouble starting fires at home. He then continues his walk along the riverside. He thinks that if he keeps going northeast, he'll keep his house to the left, always knowing where it is and where to run in case of danger. As he continues walking, he reflects on the monsters of Thai and thinks he might be able to defeat some of them, but he can't be sure yet. He also remembers his second goal, which is to find detoxifying herbs, and tries to recall any tips from the book on how to find them. Suddenly, Rio hears a sound behind him. Turning his head, he's startled to see a smaller boar. The animal charges furiously in his direction as our boy, frightened, tries to move his body. The boar closes in quickly, and in a desperate move, he throws himself to the side, trying to dodge the attack. Lying on the ground, he sees the boar ready to charge again. Still recovering and injured in the leg, he realizes the boar begins another charge at him. His hands touch the ground, and the path between him and the boar becomes a sheet of ice. The boar is caught off guard and slips, losing control of its movements. Rio gets an idea and thinks that while he still can't make his ice spears fly, when he already knows might be enough. Sliding toward our fallen protagonist, the boar crashes into the giant ice spears. Finally, the boy collapses onto the ground, relieved as the impaled boar lies lifeless. After his life-or-death battle with the boar, Rio changes his diet and begins to eat less and less of the food from the silo. He also learns that monsters in this world use magic, and the stronger they are, the better the magic they can wield. False Michael had warned him that the more he uses his magic, the better it will become, and the monsters have been using it since birth. But with time, he learned to subdue them all. His power grew slowly and steadily, one step at a time. Rios is cooking a huge piece of boar meat while a giant boar lies defeated behind him. The crucial difference between animals and monsters is a gem near the heart called a magic stone, which monsters possess and animals do not. The boy learns that the species of the monster determines whether it can use magic, and that the monsters of the Rhonda forest have wiped out the regular animal population. Rio still sees some animals alive here and there. Carnivorous animals like crocodiles and small, fast creatures like rabbits. Anicaps, carnivorous animals are still a threat to humans regardless of whether they count as a real fight compared to monsters. In this world, the monsters were so strong that they were at the top of the food chain, and adding magic to that made things much more complicated. Focused in observing the new monster, Rio remembers that the book had already taught him about the creature. The creature was called a horned bison, and it easily annihilated giant crocodiles in addition to using wind magic to make its charges lethal. Suddenly, something unexpected for the bison falls from the sky and separates its head from the rest of its body. Rio walks slowly toward the defeated bison and says that his new water magic, guillotine, is pretty cool. Then he notices that the bison's head is being consumed by something in the water. As he gets closer, he notices the speed at which the head is being devoured. That's when he discovers there's a fish similar to a piranha from Earth that was attracted by the bison's blood in the water. Rio always tried to stick to his water magic training routine as much as he could. He started getting really good at controlling the speed of his water jets, being able to pierce through any object, except magical shields. He even created what he called a water saw, which could cut through things by spinning a disc of water at high speed. He also created ice rollers that helped with manual labor in dealing with the hides of the animals he hunted. Of course, Rio also trained his body as much as he trained his magic, because when it comes to monsters, you never know what to expect. A snake tail rushes in at high speed. A giant snake known as a kite snake appears, and he remembers that it uses winged magic to swing its tail like a sonic sword. Rio stares at the snake without showing a trace of fear. The snake effortlessly cuts through the rock beside it with its sonic tail as if it were paper. Having fled quickly, Rio balances himself as he plans his counterattack. Focusing in with water bubbles surrounding him, the boy stares intently at the snake. The next moment, a light rain begins to fall over both Rio and the snake. Our protagonist raises his hand and focuses on every droplet of water around the snake. The snake, with murderous intent, flies toward the boy in a brutal and ferocious attack. Finishing his concentration, he makes a sudden motion with his hands and body. Then, gigantic ice spears pierce through the snake's body, defeating it instantly. The giant snake's venom was dissolved by the rain and likely could withstand the boiling water. However, there were monsters that Rio's cheap tricks didn't work on, like the assassin eagle, which used wind magic and supersonic speed to attack its targets. Our boy kept running at high speed while being chased by the assassin eagle. The eagle then crashes into the ground with a tremendous impact, throwing our boy to the side. Our protagonist, regaining his balance, prepares a close-range attack on the assassin eagle with his spear. Rio was sure he had hit the eagle, but it flew backward, dodging his strike. Rio struck near its eye and thinks that if he had landed a direct hit to the eye, he would have defeated the beast, by far the strongest monster he had faced so far. Focused on defending himself, he thinks he managed to save himself by counterattacking, but he never knew when another monster might appear in the middle of a fight. The monster book that False Maple had left for him contained an incredible collection of monsters and detailed descriptions about them. Since it was a beginner's edition, he assumed there was an intermediate and an advanced one, and at the end of the book, there were two special pages. One page displayed an illustration of a dragon, and the other showed an illustration of an akuma, a type of humanoid monster. The special pages were made for those who aimed to be the best of the best. But that was never Ryo's goal. He simply didn't care about that kind of goal after all. He just wanted to live a peaceful life. And so living that peaceful life, Ryo completed his first full year of the new world. Then we find our protagonist on a moonlit night, facing what seems to be another humanoid being. 1 year had passed since Ryo's arrival in the new world of Phi. Over the lake in the northernmost part of the Ronda forest, the moon approached its peak in the sky. Then a Dullan, a headless warrior, appeared before him. Our protagonist wonders what Headless Knight is doing in the Ronda forest and where he came from. The true strength of the Headless Knight lay in his swordsmanship, and he wasn't even listed in the beginner's monster book, which could only mean that either he wasn't considered a monster or his level was above beginner. If a Dullan wasn't going to use magic, Ryo wouldn't either, but the knight was incredibly skilled with the sword, and on top of that he was arrogant, as they're saying he would train Ryo whether he wanted or not. Ryo, thrown to the ground and injured, thinks that at least that's what it felt like. After landing 3 attacks that would have been fatal to anyone else, the knight turns his back on our boy. Then he mounts his horse and rides away, as if saying he expects Ryo to be better next time. Our boy didn't even know if his attacks had any effect on the knight, since he wasn't able to land a clean hit. His fighting spirit grew every day, and the first time he had lost almost instantly, but this time the battle had already lasted an hour. Ryo was moving faster and could now anticipate the knight's movements during the fight. However, when he clashed his ice sword against the knight's blade, his sword was completely shattered. Then he found himself staring at the Headless Knight with a surprised look in his eyes. The knight then launched an attack that sent Ryo flying, hurling him several meters away. Our protagonist, lying on the ground and injured, thinks at least he managed to land 3 hits today. As Ryo stands up, the knight remains still in front of him as if waiting for something. Then he draws his sword and places his hand over the blade, making it glow intensely. The sword then transforms, increasing in size and completely changing the shape of the blade. The knight then hands the blade to our protagonist, mounts his horse, and rides off again, leaving him with his new sword. Our boy, kneeling with a new sword in hand, thinks it was a gift led from a master to a disciple. Then he thinks that with his new weapon, he has to train yet harder. After his battle with the assassin eagle, he knew what he had to do, become stronger and stronger. So every morning he did 30 minutes of physical exercise to strengthen his muscles. He also ran while using his magic to the limit and trained sword fighting, the Headless Knight. In sword training, the right hand determines the blade's path and the left hand is used for support. With every strike during training, his strength and speed improved. In the second encounter with the assassin eagle, it didn't come alone, it brought its partner. In the first fight, the eagle lost an eye from engaging at close range. This time, it would make the same mistake. During the battle, our boy grew tired from running and dodging the attacks of both eagles, but he had already anticipated this. Using his magic in different ways, he managed to avoid the second eagle's surprise attack. But one-eyed assassin eagle didn't expect its companion to be killed so quickly, so it retreated and fled. Ryo thinks the eagle was the first opponent that brought him close to death, not just once, but twice. Ryo had already prepared himself for death on other occasions, but with the one-eyed eagle, he felt something different. In any case, this marked the third and final time they would meet. The eagle appeared before him completely different from their last 2 encounters. Looking at it, our boy saw it was much darker and larger than before, with a black aura surrounding it. The eagle made its first move by hurling its body at Ryo, who barely had time to dodge. Fallen to the ground, he remembered it had used the same maneuver in their first battle. After taking the eagle's hit, he was certain it was the same beast. But now it had evolved. The fight continued fiercely as our boy struggled to defend himself, realizing how much stronger the eagle had become. During the battle, the eagle shattered Ryo's ice armoring to pieces while he tried to repair it. Suddenly, he found himself unable to use his magic, and the eagle launched another charge at him. He barely managed to dodge the attack, and on top of that, he was growing exhausted. He then thinks that maybe the eagle is somehow disabling his magic. The eagle screeches and then casts a lightning spell across a massive area in front of Ryo. Dodging the eagle's lightning attack, he ends up losing his spear. The eagle, seeing an opening, prepares to launch a new assault on our boy. Ryo then draws his new sword and thinks he might be able to channel magic through it. In their final fierce exchanges, their eyes meet once again. Ryo quickly and effectively pierces the eagle's throat as it loses strength. Looking into the eagle's good eye, Ryo says he understands it, how it lost its partner and its eye, and still gave everything it had and was defeated. He continues to saying their encounter at least helped him grow and become stronger, and he thanks her for that. He didn't say she was truly brave for showing how much she had evolved, and that he would be honored to deliver the final blow. And so, pulling his sword from the monster's throat, its fate was sealed. The next day, Rio visited the battlefield where he had fought the one-eyed assassin eagle. Seeing the remnants of the battle, he finally felt that the victory was real, though he felt no pride in it. While our boy stood there, something descended before him, and he couldn't think of anything else. It was then a massive dragon landed in front of him. The dragon stood still before our hero and communicated telepathically, wondering if this is how telepathic contact is made with humans. Beta continued, saying it had been a long time since it made contact with a human, asked if a human could hear it. Still frightened, Rio begins to hear the dragon's voice in his mind. The dragon then seems pleased that he can hear it, and says that it is the dragon standing before him. Our boy wonders if this is telepathy, apologizes to the dragon, saying he was in shock but can hear it now. Then the beast asks if he has seen a bird that evolved from an assassin eagle in the area. He thought he knew that bird all too well. Immediately, our protagonist apologizes in case the bird was one of the dragon's acolytes, and the beast then asks if it was he who killed her. The dragon says she was not his acolyte and that he was merely curious, because the bird's aura had vanished from the region. He continues, saying it would made sense if one of the other dragons had eaten the bird, so he descended the mountain to check. Still with a bit of fear in his eyes, our protagonist answers that yes, he was the one who killed the one-eyed assassin eagle. The beast is surprised and says it's fine because he's satisfied with the bird's disappearance. Then he explains that this bird was the first in centuries to evolve in the forest and asks if she had been suppressing the boy's magic. Rio promptly responds that yes, she had. He says he could barely believe he wasn't able to use his magic and felt like his rights as a mage have been violated. The dragon seems to notice something unreal and says it looks like he's carrying something strange with him. Then he recognizes the sword as the sword of the fairy king, but Rio says he received it from a headless knight at the northern lake. The beast confirms that, saying the knight is the water fairy king who resides in that forest, while Rio states he is a water mage and that the sword saved him the day before. The dragon then says that's why the king liked him, and it means he's receiving magic lessons from the king. Our boy quickly replies that no, he's not taking magic lessons from the water fairy king. Then he says he's training sword fighting with the king and has never seen him use magic. The dragon finds it very strange that he's learning swordsmanship instead of water magic from the king, but says that if the king is doing that, it must mean the boy needs it. He then says that the water fairy king probably likes the boy since, like him, he has lived for thousands and thousands of years. Rio sees an opportunity and asks the dragon if it's okay for him to ask a few questions, to which the dragon immediately says yes. Then the boy begins by explaining that he'd like to know more about the Ronda forest, things like its size or what kind of place it is. He explains that the true size of the Ronda forest is that of a small continent, as it used to be called the Ronda subcontinent. The dragon also explains that the small continent is surrounded by water except to the north, where a mountain range encircles it. Next, the dragon says that as far as he knows, Rio is the only human in the Ronda subcontinent. Rio is shocked. He knew he asked for a peaceful, isolated life, but not this isolated. The beast, also surprised, says it can't be possible he's lived his whole life like that and asks where the boy is from. Then without hesitation, Rio says he was reincarnated, coming from another world, and that he knows others have come here just like him. And suddenly, a loud roar echoes, shaking the air and startling both the dragon and the boy. The dragon then closes his eyes and continues listening to the roar while Rio, frozen like a statue, stands still. Then the dragon begins to leave, saying that he's being summoned, but that they will surely meet again. Desperate, Rio asks for the dragon's name while telling him his own. He says his name is Lewin, who warns the boy not to go to the eastern mountains as dragons there may attack freely. Then the dragon takes off at terrifying speed, easily breaking the sound barrier. Our hero watches in awe as the dragon continues flying away at supersonic speed. Then our boy, now overwhelmed, says that dragons really are incredibly powerful as the dust settles around him. Sometime later, Lewin finally arrives at the location where he was being summoned. He thinks Rio seemed peculiar and wonders if he's really human, or perhaps an evolution or mutation of the species. Remembering the boy's story, the dragon comments that he has never seen anything like it, but the story seemed fascinating. And he thinks that even after such a long life, there are still things he doesn't know, and that he'll enjoy continuing to observe the boy. Rio then, watching himself through a water mirror, notices that he hasn't aged a single day. From time to time, the boy's hair grows quite a bit. Then he cuts it, just like he does with his nails, which also grow now and then. While he notices that neither of his height nor his face changes and thinks that today he'll go look for fish and salt. Then he drowns his thoughts in the warm bathtub as he takes his morning bath. Upon reaching a beach, Rio notices many pieces of wood scattered across the sand, and then he seems to notice something in the sand and runs toward it. As he gets closer, he thinks it may have been a shipwreck, and he can only see 3 people on the sand. Checking the first man's condition, he confirms that he has been dead for quite some time. In a distance, he notices that the other man has a piece of wood pierced through his body and realizes there's nothing he can do for him now either. Then he spots a third man wearing armor lying on the nearby sand. Walking over to him, Rio notices the man's right arm is in pieces and bleeding heavily. Examining the wound more closely, he wonders if an artery was hit, since the amount of blood was enormous. Real thinks that if he leaves him there, the man will bleed to death and that he must at least try to help. So looking directly at the wound, Real begins to concentrate and thinks of a way to use his water magic. Revisiting his memories, he recalls that the human body is made up of 60% water, and as a water mage, you should be able to manipulate blood. Then focusing 100%, he finds the source of the hemorrhage and tries to close it. With great effort, he manages to gather water around the man's wound and stop the bleeding. The man's injuries so seem to gush a lot of blood at first. As the bleeding begins to stop, Real finally feels proud that he was somehow able to help the man. Then he lifts the armored man from the hot sand and carries him in his arms. Soon after, he finds a cart among the wreckage and places the man inside, making it easier to transport him. Sometime later, the man wakes up startled in a place he doesn't recognize. As he stands up, he notices he's in a house, and a very large one at that, and wonders if it might be the mayor's house of some village. Then he notices something to his right that catches his attention. He sees that his sword and armor are propped up against the wall beside him. The man then leaves the house and sees Real holding firewood and immediately introduces himself as Abel, asking if Real was the one who saved him. Right afterward, he thanks the boy for saving his life. Our hero says it was nothing, and then he only carried Abel back to his house after finding him on the beach. Inen says that he was only able to save one man out of the 3 who were on the sand, and Abel says that it's okay because they were smugglers. Real then stops what he's doing and turns to Abel, asking if they really were smugglers. Our hero then thinks that Abel must also be a smuggler since they were together, but at the same time he doubts it because the man doesn't seem like a bad person. Still with a thoughtful look, our boy realizes they're talking without any issues. So he continues thinking that Abel probably isn't speaking Japanese and that False Michael did a good job helping them understand each other. Then with a smile on his face, Real introduces himself to Abel and asks if he wants to eat, since he must be starving. Still in shock, Abel hears our hero say he hung up his clothes and that they should be dry by now. Back at the beach with Abel, Real shows him where the other 2 men were who had been with him. Speculating on where the bodies ended up, our hero tells Abel how lucky he was, while Abel asks the boy not to speak so formally. Our boy tells Abel that it's normal for him to speak formally with older people, while the man says he prefers a more casual tone, like between friends. In a brief moment of silence, our boy thinks that maybe he's made his first friend in Phi, and Abel wonders whether the ship's cargo sank or just disappeared. The man continues thinking that maybe everything from the ship is inside the Kraken's stomach and that there's nothing he can do about it now. He thanks our hero, but says that what he's looking for is no longer anywhere on the shore. He then says he needs to get to Lud to send a message to his friends. Rio then says he doesn't know the city but assumes it must be to the north, and that Abel will have to travel a long distance to get there. Then our hero explains that there are no cities or people nearby, while the man says he'll have to make the journey either way. The man then turns to Rio and asks if he'd like to go with him. A few seconds pass without our hero responding, so the man starts waving his hand in front of Rio's eyes to get his attention. Later, in our boy's cabin, the man apologizes for being so abrupt and explains that it would be like a job or that Rio would be like a guide. He continues, saying he even pay Rio and help him out if he wanted to try life in the city. The man, sweating, then asks our boy what he thinks. Our hero accepts the proposal, but says he can only go the next morning as he still has things to take care of. Abel, happy, thanks our boy for going with him. After washing the dinner dishes, Real informs the man that he's going out and will be back soon. When asked where he's going so late, he replies while stepping out of the cabin. He also explains that he needs to let someone know he'll be away and asks Abel to wait, as it might take a while. As the man responds, we then see the Headless Knight and his horse waiting for our hero. Standing before him, our boy says he will leave the forest tomorrow and that tonight's training will be the last until he returns from his adventure. The knight waits patiently as Real lifts the sword he received from him and points it at the warrior. Our hero then prepares himself and tells the knight he doesn't want the training to be like the others. He wants him to come at him with everything he's got. Meanwhile, by candlelight, Abel wonders who Rio said he was going to inform, since no one else lies in the area. He thinks Rio is alone now, but maybe he was with someone and went to visit their grave, though that wasn't something he planned to pry into. Even though Rio doesn't know where to see if Lune is, he said it's far to the north and wonders why he said that. He also reflects that it would be very hard to go alone, considering he doesn't even know how big the forest is. Wrapping up his thoughts, he says that Rio is a mage without a staff and is probably bad at fighting, and that he'll help him when they reach the city with clothes and so on. Our hero is tired and sweaty, his sword buried in the ground, panting from the training with the Headless Knight. Then he notices something, a movement from the knight in front of him. The warrior then extends something to Rio, who wonders what it is. The noble Headless Knight stands proudly before our hero, without answering his question. Afterward, Abel says he doesn't want to seem rude to our boy, and then he doesn't have to answer if he doesn't want to. He then asks where Rio went last night, and Real explained that he went to inform his master that he would be away on an adventure as he puts on his new hood and cloak. Explaining to Abel that it was like a farewell gift, the man asks if it has any special effects, and our boy says he doesn't know. Then the two begin walking toward the flowers and finally decide to start their journey. Looking back at his cabin, our hero silently bids farewell to that place, a nostalgic look in his eyes. During the morning, they wandered the land and headed north without encountering any monsters, but by mid-afternoon, something happened. A small boar appeared in their path, and Abel quickly drew his sword and charged at the creature. With a precise strike, the warrior impaled the small boar and ended the fight in seconds. Surprised, our hero looked at the other with wide eyes. Seeing the doubt in the warrior's eyes, Real explained that parts of Abel's body glow when he uses a combat skill, and that the way he moves changes during it. The warrior then explains that it's normal, that those are combat skills restricted to warriors who use weapons. In any case, she says they should focus on finding a good place to camp as night is approaching. He also mentions they pass a large tree with a hole in the middle, and that it should serve well for camping. They could also eat the boar. Already inside the tree with the camp set up, Abel says he'll rest first, but tells our hero not to hesitate and to wake him if anything happens. Then the warrior lies down and starts to rest, while Rio sits at the camp, deep in thought. He then thinks that, since he has time, he'll practice controlling his magic. And so our hero's watch went on, the night growing deeper and calmer with each passing hour. A few hours later, Abel wakes up and tells our hero to rest while he takes over the watch. The man then observes the rabbit our hero had hunted. Examining the catch, he questions Rio's methods, but finds them very valid and effective. Looking at Rio lying down, he's sure that the cloak wasn't made by humans and wonders what kind of mentor he has. Abel thought the boy's master was a spirit, but spirits don't give gifts like cloaks, so it must be some kind of legendary creature, like a dragon. He is certain the cloak wasn't made by humans, which means the boy's master could still be a spirit. As he shivers in the cold, Abel thinks it can't be him again. Seconds later, our hero wakes up and greets the warrior with a good morning. Then our heroes continue their journey toward their goal. Abel walks forward with his sword drawn, while Rio follows behind, observing the vegetation. Suddenly, something falls from the sky to the right of the warrior, startling them both. Abel draws his sword and thinks it might be something invisible or an enemy using invisibility. Looking up, they realize it's a killer eagle. Our hero warns the warrior that the beast uses air magic to attack from a distance. The warrior suggests they retreat, but Real informs him they have a boar pursuing them and unknown beasts ahead. Unfortunately, escape isn't an option. They wonder if they might have fallen into some kind of trap, but our hero confirms it's just a coincidence. The open field seems to be used by the killer eagle to hunt, and they wonder what they should do now. Rio says it's best they fight in the clearing, and he'll take care of the killer eagle while the other handles the boar. Abel, worried, warns the boy that the eagle's aerial assault and charge can kill even a warrior like him if he's not careful. Our hero says defense is his specialty as an ice mage and assumes warriors had a hard time dealing with flying targets. The warrior says that's fine, steps forward, and prepares for combat. Still running, the warrior tells Rio he'll return as soon as he deals with the boar and tells him not to dare die. Our hero tells Abel to keep a cool head or he'll end up getting hurt. Then the warrior runs toward the boar, wondering how Rio detected the monster from so far away. The boar then controls the surrounding rocks to launch a magical stone attack, raining a barrage down on our warrior. Our warrior uses a combat skill and gracefully dodges every rock thrown at him. He then brings his sword down toward the boar as soon as he gets close. He pulls his sword from the body of the defeated boar. Then he drops to his knees, planting his sword in the ground and gasping for breath. Meanwhile, he thinks he used too many abilities too quickly during a fight, and a fatigue has finally caught up to him. But he needs to recover quickly because Real needs his help. He then picks up the body of the defeated boar and carries it back to where our hero is waiting with the killer eagle. Returning to the spot where he left our hero, he sees the scene of the killer eagle lying on the ground with our hero smiling beside the defeated monster. Completely in disbelief, the warrior looks at Rio and asks if he really defeated the beast. Our hero, smiling, says yes, he did, and mentions the monsters ahead also retreated. Abel then drops his knees, stunned, as the boy asks if he's hurt. Looking at the scene of Rio's battle, he says he's not hurt, then he's fine. Then he says he's just a little tired. Abel immediately asks how Rio managed to dodge the killer evil's attacks. He continues saying that invisible air magic attacks are extremely hard to dodge using just sight. Meanwhile, Rio asks him to turn around and face him. With curiosity, Abel turns to face our hero. Then the warrior notices and touches a thin wall of ice. Rio explains the barrier is hard to notice, and the warrior confirms it's practically invisible. Abel then realizes that the killer eagle practically defeated itself while charging into an almost invisible wall of ice. The warrior says he knows many air, fire, and earth mages, but an old man once told him water mages don't really fight, and he will be proven wrong. Smiling, our protagonist asks Abel what that was. Abel promptly replies that it's nothing, he was just talking to himself. Then both look up toward the mountain and hear frightening sounds. They decide they'll have to go either left or right to find a way out of the mountain range. The warrior says he has a bad feeling about both directions. And if at that moment the Abel pulls out a coin and suggests they leave the decision to chance. Heads, they go left. Tails, they go right. Before our hero can even think, a warrior has already flipped the coin into the air. The coin lands on the warrior's hand, the heads facing up, so they decide to take the path to the left. Then Abel seems to notice something strange about Rio's behavior. He asks if there's something wrong with the coin, and the boy says he's never seen money before. He then asks if he can take a closer look, and the warrior promptly says yes. Abel proceeds to explain how the coin economy works in this world, and Rio compares it to 19th century Earth while asking how many nations exist in this world. Drawing from memory, Abel says there are 3 major realms: the Kingdom of Nightly, the Empire of Debui, and the Federation of Handaliu. While speaking, the warrior once again senses something strange around them. He then says they seem to be in a stone golem nest, while Rio comments that he didn't even know golems had nests. The warrior explains that a nest is just what they call a place where a large number of golems appear, and Rio wonders if golems shouldn't have human-like limbs. After stopping to count, the warrior says there are 12 of them, and that running isn't really a good option. At that moment, our boy asks Abel if it's okay for him to test a new magic, a new attack, and the warrior agrees. Our hero then stretches out his hand and focuses on his new spell. Suddenly, 10 thick walls of ice fall upon all the golems in the area, making a sound like an earthquake. With a silly grin, our hero jokes that this is what you call a weapon of mass destruction. They then clear the area and notice a large dark yellow magic stone. It's explained that the value of these stones is determined by their size and color. Rio says it's nice to have battle spoils and tells Abel he can keep the magic stone. Slightly incredulous, the warrior says fine and that he'll hold on to that prize. Meanwhile, Rio realizes that the method he used to defeat the monsters didn't work as intended. The warrior says that if it weren't for Rio, they might be dead, and it's not like he even knew about harvesting magic stones, to which Rio agrees. Some time passes, and our hero notices something to his right and asks Abel what it is. As Rio points out that it looks like a giant hippopotamus, the warrior sense is called a behemoth, and our hero jokingly asks if he wants to hunt it. Our boy does the math and thinks the behemoth is far too large even for his 10 ice walls, and Abel confirms that and tells him not to even try anything against that thing. Rio then turns serious and asks the warrior if he thinks he's crazy, and the warrior immediately says yes. Then our hero seems to notice something in the distance. He sees something flying toward them in the distance and thinks it might be dragons. As they get closer, our heroes can see they're wyverns and not dragons. They both quickly realize the wyverns aren't heading toward them. They're heading for a behemoth. Rio gets excited, saying he'll finally get to witness a beast battle. He points out that the behemoth is clearly outnumbered since 6 wyverns are about to attack it. Then one of the flying beasts screeches and unleashes a sharp gust of wind toward the behemoth. Our heroes are shocked by the winged monster's attack and wonder what the behemoth will do. Then, completely still, the behemoth uses stone magic to summon massive boulders around itself like a shield. We don't see the wyvern's attack heading toward one of the rocks the creatures summon as a barrier. The wind attacks from the flying monsters crash into the stones summoned by the behemoth, protecting it completely from damage. The wyverns quickly launch another wave of wind attacks at the creature. The behemoth then summons enormous stone walls around itself for protection. Surprised, both our heroes and the wyverns stare stunned at the towering walls that formed around the giant beast. Abel says he knew of behemoths but didn't know they could use magic, while our hero was expecting a battle, but not a magical one. The wave monsters hover patiently, circling the stone walls the land beast summoned around itself. And with a terrible roar, the behemoth breaks down its stone walls and stares directly at the wyverns. Suddenly, the flying monsters and our heroes notice that something strange has happened. The wyverns suddenly lose their ability to fly and fall to the ground around the behemoth. Abel asks Rio if the monster somehow paralyzed the wyverns from all directions, while our hero says how they got it. Once again, the behemoth lets out a guttural roar, frightening everyone and making the ground shake. As the wyverns thrash on the ground, Rio thinks he's seen this happen before. Then the boy says it's probably magic nullification. Shocked, Abel asks if that's even possible, as he's never seen a human capable of doing that, let alone the monster, and Rio tells him to look more closely. Our boy points out that the winged monsters are trying to get up but can't, and if they were paralyzed, they wouldn't be able to move at all. Abel can't believe what his eyes are seeing, but then he pauses and says he's heard of traps like this in dungeons, and Rio gets very excited when he hears the word dungeons. He never asks if the dungeons in the Kingdom of Nightly have anti-magic rooms, and the warrior says no. The dungeons are in the Western Province, not in the kingdom. As the behemoth tramples over the wyverns on the ground, a warrior asks our hero if he's interested in dungeons, and he promptly answers yes. While the beast finishes off the wyverns, Abel says Rio is lucky because Loon has the only dungeon in the Central Provinces. Our boy says the warrior should have told him that earlier, but the warrior defends himself, saying he didn't know Rio liked dungeons that much. Then they continue walking away while talking about how terrifying that battle was, wondering what a fight between Abel and the behemoth would be like. Next, they watch as a wyvern eats a boar and prepare their trap. Rio raises his arms and focuses on his magic. Suddenly, massive ice spikes fall from the sky. All of them strike the monster, pinning it to the ground while the warrior quickly moves to the creature's head. After that, while talking, the boy suggests it might be good to hunt some animals since their food supply is starting to run low. Then a small ice arrow hits a rabbit, pinning it to the mountain sag. They also start ambushing other wyverns that are scattered around the area. After defeating another beast, Real thinks it's starting to get easy to hump them, while Abel admits he's still surprised at how easy it's been. Meanwhile, our hero slices the meat and says he just needs to finish drying it so they can continue their journey. Then the boy comments that maybe they can get through by that path, while Abel, concerned, tells him not to let his guard down. Just as Abel finishes speaking, both look to their left and spot a giant beast resembling a griffin staring at them. They both notice the creature is fixated on the rabbit meat Rio is tied to his waist, so he takes one and throws it to the beast. The creature happily eats it while Rio says it looks like it's starving. The griffin stays cheerful and bouncy, and our hero tells Abel to feed it too. The warrior then takes a rabbit from his belt and also tosses it to the beast, which flies off after grabbing the food. Then our hero notices a road behind the beast and points it out to Abel. The warrior sees his signpost and tells Rio it's definitely a path, and Rio calls him over to follow the trail. The Yule Mountains are a mountain range to the south of the central provinces, known for being impossible to cross, not even by adventurers. Long ago, the path had a different name, but no one remembers it anymore. Nowadays, it's called the Evil Mountains because it's infested with orcs and ogres. Then we see Abel breathing a sigh of relief if they're still alive after surviving the Evil Mountains on their way to civilization. Real then asks if the warrior is a rank B adventurer. He confirms it, asking why the question. Our hero explains he's unsure about the benefits of registering with an adventurer's guild, and Abel explains that he doesn't have to pay tolls or city taxes. He also explains that the guild card serves as an ID, allowing free entry into any city, and gives access to better market prices. Rio says that's exactly what he needed to hear, and Abel adds that the guild also stores adventurers' belongings and profits. He finishes by explaining it would be far too dangerous for adventurers to wander around carrying all their wealth in their pockets. Amazed, Rio thinks that guilds are basically like banks. He then finds himself in the middle of a city with tall buildings around him, looking at a pamphlet while holding a pouch. Our hero remembers the questions he asked Abel along the way, such as whether he could withdraw money from other guild branches at any time. Abel explains that his knowledge is limited to the central provinces, but that the guild operates as an independent organization present in every nation. He then adds that when nations go to war, they can hire the guild and adventurers to fight as mercenaries. While Rio thinks that would be cheaper than sending knights into battle, the warrior says that this type of commission can be accepted or declined by adventurers. Abel goes on to say he fears the possibility of an enemy taking everything he owns, and that he have no choice but to fight. Rio then reacts angrily, asking how they allow their money to be used as a hostage and how the governments permit such a thing. He then points and says he can see a city in the distance. Abel says he's almost certain it's the city of Kaladi, which means they've reached the kingdom of Nightly. The warrior explains that Kaladi is the southeasternmost city of the kingdom, and that if they walk northeast for a day, they'll reach Lune, Abel's final destination. He also suggests that if Rio wants to register as an adventurer, he should do it in Lune and not in Kaladi, prompting our hero to ask why. The warrior explains that Lune is the largest border city in the kingdom and attracts all kinds of people, mainly because it's the only one in the region with a dungeon. Abel says that if Rio makes Lune his home base, he'll feel more settled since cities tend to treat local adventurers with more privileges. Rai replies that it makes sense, but he still doesn't have a card to show when they arrive in Kaladi. Abel explains that it's not a problem since he's a B-rank adventurer and can sponsor Rio, and that the fee is just 1 silver coin. Our boy continues by saying that the warrior should know he's always had a lot of respect for him. While the warrior, visibly moved, looks at Rio. Still a bit awkward, he says it's fine and that they'll spend one night in Kaladi and Rio needs to try a local dish. Next, Rio is at a restaurant trying what looks like curry with rice, amazed by the flavor. One after the other, he orders more curry and more dishes, stuffing himself throughout the night. While walking for the city, Rio asks Abel if it's curry and lewd too, and the warrior assures him it's very common in the southern region of the kingdom. Our hero then promises himself that he'll try to recreate the curry when he returns home to the forest of Rondo. The next day, walking through the city, our boy asks Abel if there are residents who live outside the city too. Abel explains that yes, usually farmers live outside the village, but in the past, it lived within the city. He continues explaining that's why Loom doesn't close its gates at night, while Rio questions the safety, since Loom seems to have far more patrols than Keladi. Abel says that because of its history and size, he believes Loon does a good job of keeping the peace. Upon arriving at the gates of Loon, the guard greets Abel by name and says his companion must pay the fee, and Abel says he'll handle it. He then rummages through his pouch, searching for the right amount to give the guard. Abel says they should go straight to the guild and asks if Rio really wants to register, and our hero confirms, saying he wants to try the adventurer's life. The warrior says that since he's with him, Rio can apply for a rank up. He explains that adventurers usually start at rank F but can jump to E or D if accompanied by someone of rank B or higher. Our hero then asks what the advantages of being rank D are, and Abel explains that he would earn more money by taking on better missions and rewards. Rio then asks the warrior if wyvern magic stones are valuable, and he replies that they're extremely valuable because those beasts are hard to defeat. He continues saying they're practically priceless since they're rarely seen for sale in the market, and that if Rio sold all the ones he has, it might crash the market. Then, in front of the Adventurers Guild, the warrior says the guild knows how to handle that, so he doesn't need to worry. As soon as they enter the guild, a young woman asks if Abel is real, while a man says he's surprised to see Abel in the flesh. A large warrior behind a girl is shocked to see Abel alive, and the narrator tells us that B-rank adventurers are rare, and that Abel is the leader of the Crimson Sword group. The group formed by Abel include the following members: Rhea, the priestess, Warren, the shield bearer, and Lynn, the mage. Then our hero pauses to think that being friends with Abel could be very advantageous, considering how well-liked he is by everyone around him. Evelyn places his hands on Rio's shoulders and introduces him to everyone as the savior of his life, the one who made it possible for him to arrive there alive. Next, he says Rio is going to register as an adventurer, and after that will be one of them. He asks everyone to be kind to the new member. Everyone then gives wide smiles to our hero. Rio introduces himself and says he's happy to meet everyone present. One man thanks our hero for saving Abel's life, and another says he hopes to get to know him better as well. Abel then asks Madad if she can handle Rio's paperwork, as he intends to recommend him for D-rank adventure. The girl says she can take care of everything, but he'll need something to prove that he's worthy of being considered a D-rank adventurer. Abel had already expected that and asks if it's possible to make the guild master now, and Nina responds that she believes it is. While they walk there, the girl says the master has been in his office all day handling paperwork, and he's in a bad mood. She says she'll let the guild master know they're there and asks them to wait in a lounge in the meantime. Abel then sits comfortably on a sofa while Rio stands waiting to be called. Suddenly, they hear a loud voice shouting, asking what they were saying. At the same time, our heroes hear heavy footsteps approaching. A man then enters the lounge and kneels when he sees Abel, clearly overwhelmed with relief. Abel apologizes for worrying the guild master but says he's alive, while the master says he lost his will to live when he heard Abel had gone missing. Regaining his composure, the master asks where the mage is, and Abel points to Rio, saying that he saved his life. The man introduces himself as Humaglass, the guild master of Loon, and thanks Rio for saving Abel's life. Rio responds that it's no problem, that he just happened to cross paths with the warrior by chance. Then the warrior tells the guild master that our hero wants to register in the Lewd Guild and that he wants to recommend him for a rank increase. The master says they'll need proof if he really intends to recommend him. Nina then says that's exactly what Abel came to discuss with the guild master. Shortly after, Nina excuses herself, saying that if they need her, she'll be at the front desk. As she closes the door, the guild master heads toward an armchair in the lounge. Finally sitting down in his chair, he says he needs to know a few things first. Abel steps forward and says Rio is stronger than him, while our hero asks if he had something bad to be saying such a thing. The guild master is clearly impressed by Abel's statement. The warrior continues, saying our hero is a clown but doesn't mess around when it comes to work, and he displays the spoils from the monsters they defeated on their way there, spraying the magic stones out on the table. Abel shows their size and color to everyone. The guild master is surprised and says they are air attribute magic stones due to their green color, but leaves something unsaid. He then adds that not only are they huge but also dark in color, and asks if they got them from wyverns. Abel confirms and says that Rio has just as many as he does. Still in disbelief, the guild master asks where they found so many wyverns. If they were in the city, they have to recruit every living soul to stop an attack like that. The warrior reassures him, saying they hunted them south of the Evil Mountains, and the master asks how they ended up there in the first place. The warrior then explains that their ship was destroyed and he ended up on a large piece of land in which they headed toward the mountains and found a wyvern nest. The guild master then asks if Abel intends to use his network of contacts to sell the stones without destabilizing the market, and Abel sheepishly says yes. Then Hugh says he can sell to a wide range of buyers, including members of the royal family, and that he can get them the money within 2 or 3 days. He then asks if they should split the profits 50-50, but Abel says no, that he only wants 40% and 60% should go to Rio. Rio disagrees and says it should be 50-50, but the warrior insists that he needs to repay our hero for saving his life and getting him back safely. Our boy was about to protest again when the guild master told him not to even think about tarnishing Abel's honor by refusing the proposed split. So finally, our boy gives in and accepts the terms, 60% for him and 40% for Abel. Meanwhile, at the reception desk, Nina is speaking to someone who doesn't seem to be listening as she asks them to wait. Then we see the hallway and the receptionist shouting for someone to stop because things aren't settled yet. We don't see Rio, noticing something strange just outside the hall's door. A girl opens the door and is shocked. Her legs give out and she starts crying when she sees that Abel is alive. Smiling, the warrior then apologizes to Lynn for making her worry. Right after, a priestess and a tall warrior enter the room and Abel greets them, saying he's back. The The priestess, her eyes filled with emotion, welcomes him back. The guildmaster, standing up, says they have a lot to discuss and that Nina and Rio will find the paperwork in his office. In whose office he tells our hero to sit and asks Mana for the relevant papers to register Rio as a D-rank adventurer. Rio, a bit shy, asks the master if it's really okay for him to be ranked E, and the man reassures him that it is. He then asks our hero, who wouldn't be convinced by the number of magic stones they brought back. Rio, still embarrassed, says the final blows were all dealt by Abel, not him. Hugh says he knows the warrior is skilled, but he also knows that no matter how talented, a warrior alone would never take down a wyvern by himself, which means our hero was strong enough to create the opportunity for Abel to finish off the beasts. In any case, our hero is certainly good enough to register as a D-rank adventurer. The guildmaster gives Rio a light, friendly punch and is quite surprised. He then says Rio is pretty athletic for a mage. Our hero explains that he used to hunt alone and had to train his body in case he ran out of magic in the middle of a fight or knew to run. The guildmaster says he completely understands what he means and wishes more young people today thought like that too. Right after, someone knocks on the guildmaster's office door and he tells them to come in. Nina enters the office with what looks like a crystal ball and says she brought the registration tool. Hugh thanks her and says he'll leave the paperwork to her. Telling our hero to follow whatever instructions Nina gives, everything will go smoothly. Nina takes the opportunity to formally introduce herself to Rio, saying she works at the Adventurers Guild of Lu. Our hero says it's a pleasure to meet her as well and thanks her for the hospitality. Saying across for him, Nina says she needs to establish some basic facts first and asks him to answer a few questions. She asks for his name, occupation, and the attribute of his occupation, all of which Rio answers correctly, except the last one, when she asks about his residence. Embarrassed, our hero says he doesn't have a residence yet because he just arrived in the city. She then explains that he can stay in the guild's dormitory for up to 300 days after registering, which should give him plenty of time to settle in. She also says the Dorns help new adventurers get to know each other and he's free to leave any time within those 300 days if he wants. As he picks up the paper handed to him, Rio thinks Phi is still full of mysteries as there are no printers yet, but the quality and quantity of copies is incredible. Nai then asks if our hero has ever entered a dungeon and he replies that he hasn't yet. She says the guild offers a monthly seminar about dungeons, and in addition, there are various free courses and seminars for beginner adventurers as well. She then recommends the dungeon seminar and Rio, very excited, says yes, he wants to attend the seminar. Smiling our hero's enthusiasm, Nina says the dungeon seminar will take place the day after tomorrow. She says the dungeon seminar lasts 5 days with a different topic each day and she recommends that he attend all of them. Finally, she says she will fill out the form for him and tells him to be on the 3rd floor of the guild hall at 9 in the morning the day after tomorrow. Rio then wonders if in Phi they measure time the same way as on Earth. Next, Nana tells him that he can check the time on the tower in the plaza and explains that the tower rings at specific times, including 9 in the morning. So our hero confirms that time is measured the same way as on Earth. Then the girl informs him that the interview part is complete and that now he only needs to do the registration, while Rio asks what she means by that. Nina then points to the crystal ball she brought and asks her hero to place his hand over it. Our boy then places his hand over the ball and a voice says that he has been registered. Smiling, Nana tells him he can remove his hand from the crystal ball and thanks him. Shortly after, she hands the boy his guild ID card and informs him that if it gets damaged or destroyed, it costs 1 gold coin to replace it. While thanking her, our hero reads the card and wonders if he can collect points with it. A few minutes later, Abel's adventurer party enters the guild master's office, all of them smiling. The warrior then thanks Hugh for letting them use the lounge to talk and says they're heading out. Lin Min says they'll have a party at 6 in the evening at the Golden Wave to celebrate Abel's safe return, and she hopes to see Nina and Hugh there. Abel then turns to our hero and says he has no choice but to go, since he's the guest of honor. Rio, still confused, turns and looks at the group. The warrior explains that the Golden Wave is an inn where they usually stay, and that he'll book a room for Rio as well so that he can drink as much as he wants. Then Abel finishes by saying that Rio doesn't have a choice and can't say no to the invitation. A voice says the registration process is complete and asks if our hero has any questions. The warrior, excited, says he'll answer any question Rio might have and tells them to head out. The priestess says she'll go to the inn to start getting things ready, while Abel tells Hugh that he's stealing Rio from him. Our hero then turns and thanks Nina and the guild master for all their help. And Nina says that our boy is now officially a loon adventurer and informs him that she'll return to the reception desk while he thanks her. As soon as everyone leaves, the guild master kneels and shouts that he's so happy he could cry. Then he comments to himself how bluey things got when they found out a bull was missing and gives thanks that he came back alive. He still can't believe the warrior ended up past the evil mountains because of a shipwreck and thinks that would have been terrible for them. He then decides that the warrior will no longer need to investigate the smuggling ring and that from now on, he won't send him on any jobs involving water or the sea. He mentally thanks Rio again for bringing Abel back alive as he doesn't know what he would have done if he had returned. Next, he approaches a cabinet full of books and thinks he should inform someone that the warrior is safe. Then he walks over to the shelf and picks up a device that looks like a telephone. Meanwhile, Rio and Abel walk through the streets of Loon, and the warrior says he'll give a promise reward for saving him and will buy clothes and a staff for him. He explains to our hero that he's probably attached to his letter clothes and sandals, but he'll make sure to get something that doesn't stray too far from the style he's used to. Our hero replies that Abel doesn't need to walk on eggshells because he knows it's not appropriate to walk through the city wearing only a leather loincloth. He adds that he's not attached to those clothes since he wore whatever he could find in the forest, so he'll be happy to wear whatever the warrior gives him. The warrior then breathes a sigh of relief upon hearing that and informs Rio that he can pick out some casual clothes and a few more elegant ones. As they keep walking, our hero asks Abel why he would need a staff. While they're picking out clothes, he wonders if, even as a mage, he really doesn't need one. From inside the fitting room, Rio explains that he doesn't. He's able to use magic without a staff. Abel mentions he's heard that staffs increase magical power and wonders what Rio's abilities would be like if he used one. Still getting dressed, our hero comments that he's never used one, and if needed, he has his sword for close combat. Surprised, the warrior asks if he actually knows how to use a sword or if he's just talking about the knife he carries, not a real sword. Rio wonders if he hasn't already talked about this with Abel. Then he remembers the conversation where he mentioned that being a wind mage, he would charge in to attack enemies, something he wouldn't say if he didn't use a sword. As they leave the shop, the warrior asks again if he really doesn't want a staff, and the boy replies that he doesn't need one. Rio adds that he wouldn't even know how to use it, and besides, he already has his sword. Abel agrees but points out that technically he doesn't actually have a proper sword. Our hero looks confused, shows his sword, and insists that yes, this is his sword. The warrior then asks if he really calls that a sword since he's always assumed it was just a dagger. Rio says that's not the real issue. The problem is that he doesn't even know the basics about the world. The warrior wonders why he says that, and our hero admits he doesn't know basic things like units of measurement with the length of a day. Abel comments that he always thought Rio was strange, but he didn't realize he had absolutely no common knowledge about everyday life. Our hero says the phrase, knowing you know nothing, explaining that admitting ignorance is a sign of wisdom, and in Rio's case, he truly knows nothing. The warrior spends some time explaining the basics of the world and tells him he doesn't have to memorize everything at once, but our hero manages to remember it all. Abel then wonders if, on top of everything else, a kid might be a genius. He suggests they leave that thought behind if they've just arrived at the famous Golden Wave Tavern and warns Rio to get ready to drink. As the sun rises in Loon, our hero wakes up the morning after the previous night's drinking. He thinks he's hungover because his head is pounding. He assumes Emil carried him to the room last night. Bab, along with a hangover, explains the state he was in the night before. And then scenes at the tavern show people with mugs in hand celebrating evil's triumphant return. Rio and Abel drink and laugh, talking about how delicious the drink is and how perfectly it hit. As he descended the stairs, he remembered an old poem he once heard about tall grass surviving through the dreams of great warriors. He then sits in the tavern's common room and lowers his head, still feeling hungover. A lady washed by greets our hero with a good morning and tells him breakfast will be served soon and that he can sit wherever he likes. Rio thanks the lady and walks to order, intending to ask another question. He then asks about the bill from the previous night, since he's moving into the guild's lodging, and the woman tells him not to worry. Abel already paid for everything. Surprised, Rio thinks about how kind the warrior is. After all, anyone who pays for others is already better than most. Not long after, he heads to the Adventurers Guild headquarters and tells Nina he'd like to follow up on yesterday's offer. She greets him good morning and asks how she can help, as he says he wants to know more about the guild's lodging. Nina explains that there are currently 30 people staying there, though some are in the dungeon and not everyone knows every day, so we'll still see people around. She adds that each room houses 6 people, and a common area is open to all. Since there's no one else in line, she offers to give him a tour. If they walk, she comments that she hopes he enjoys the party, mentioning that everyone left happy, though Rita feels he drank too much. Nina recommends he stop by the guild shop for a detox potion to cure his hangover, and he admits he didn't know potions could do that. He then takes the opportunity to ask about the lodging rules, and Nina explains he can come and go as he pleases, with access to rooms, shared bathrooms, and a hall with a kitchen. She adds that there are no caretakers among the residents, and that everyone is responsible for themselves. Impressed, Real asks if there were ever caretakers, and Nina replies that yes, there were, but that's a long story. The only service outsourced now is cleaning. She then says that a former adventurer runs a cleaning business in the city, and Rio comments that this is what adventurers do when they retire. Next, Man informs him that he'll be sharing room 10 with Nils and Ito, who aren't there at the moment because they went to the dungeon together. Upon arriving at room 10, Nana shows the door where the nameplates are hung and says she'll put his up now as it's already ready. A bit shy, Real agrees, and a receptionist hangs his nameplate next to the door. We see 3 nameplates hanging with the names of the room members and space for 2 more. A knocking sound is heard from the door downstairs. Someone gives permission to enter and Nina looks outside and says they're both there. She leaves the room accompanied by our hero, announcing that she's the guild receptionist. With a smile in her eyes, she says that Knowles and Ito are home today. Embarrassed because shirtless boy greets Nina, and the girl says hello as well. Nina comments that the timing was perfect, as she was just about to introduce Rio to them. She asks them to take good care of him, and the boy takes the chance to introduce himself. The girl doesn't seem too thrilled about sharing the room with another member. The boy promptly introduces himself as Mills and points to the girl, saying she's Ito and that both are happy to meet him. Nina says she'll return to the reception desk and reminds Rio not to be late for tomorrow's seminar, which should be easy since he'll already be sleeping there. As Nina walks away, Nils puts on a shirt while Ito watches him with a serious look. Now dressed, Nils comments that Miss Mana is very beautiful. Ito tells him to calm down, saying she knows everyone is in love with the receptionist, but he's definitely now in the race. Indignant, he explains that it's every man's dream to settle down with one after becoming famous, and she replies that those girls are promised to nobles, not to ordinary adventurers. Meanwhile, Ito tells him to forget about all that and says to our hero that they don't need to be formal, since they're roommates now. The girl then confesses that she was worried about who they'd end up sharing the room with, since eventually someone new would show up and she's glad it turned out to be him. Nils agrees, saying he would hate to have someone like Dan from room 1 as a roommate. Real, a little awkward, says that kind of thing can happen when personalities are too different. Then Nils says he's a swordsman and that Ito is a priestess, then asks about Rio since he seems like a mage. Our hero, looking at Nils, replies that he's right, he's a mage. The boy says he heard Nina talking about the seminar and asks if Rio is going to attend, and he confirms that he is and that he'll attend all 5 days. Nils then says he's only alive today thanks to that seminar. Sometime later, someone knocks on the door of room 10. Nina then appears with a new person, saying he just registered with the guild and will be staying in the dorm with them. The boy introduces himself, saying his name is Ammon. The swordsman steps forward, saying his name is Mills and that the others are Rio and Ito. Nine informs them that Ammon will also be attending the seminar the next day and tells him and our hero to go together, and says goodbye and leaves the room. Nose looks mesmerized, saying how truly beautiful Nina is. Then looking at Ammon, Ito says he seems very young and asks if he's already an adult. The boy says it's true, that he's only 16, but since his family passed away, he decided to become an adventurer to survive. The swordsman says they're all basically in the same boat and that it's really cool that he and our hero are in the same class. Rio then tells Ammon that they're going to learn a lot over the next 5 days together, while the other two say they're heading back to the dungeon and wish them good luck in the seminar. Elsewhere, we see Lin shouting at Abel, saying that something's impossible. The warrior replies that he doesn't like giving her bad news, but yes, it's possible. Lin says she knows the ice wall spell, but it's impossible to cast it in midair and how to fall on enemies. She insists that it's impossible for any element, since no one can create magic or magical phenomena at a distance, only around themselves. Her other two companions say that Lin is getting too worked up and that if Abel says he saw it, then they believe him. Turning to her companion, Lin says she knows she's right because it's common sense, and accuses her of agreeing only because she's attached to Abel. Rhea agrees that even like mages can only heal those near them and that it would be extremely convenient if they could heal from a distance. Abel says he's simply recounting events as they happen and that this is how they obtained the yellow magic stone from the golem. While observing the stone, his companions ask him what he's going to do with such a huge stone. Abel says he could sell it for money, but he'd have to say who split the profits with, and things would get complicated once he mentioned Rio's name. He continues saying that just because he registered in Loon doesn't mean his loyalty lies with the kingdom of Knightly, as people will try to win him over for their own kingdoms. Lemon says it's quite likely, considering that if even half of what Abel says about him is true, then he really is incredible. Edel gets upset upon realizing how little credibility he has with his friend. In any case, it's also possible that he might just leave Loon and end up in another city. Rhea says she understands, and if that happens, Loon would lose a vital resource, and by extension, so would the kingdom of Knightly. She continues by saying it would be terrible if he ended up in the Empire, while Abel replies that he wouldn't because the Empire doesn't suit Riel. His friend asks what he means by that, while Lin states that the Empire is the only one capable of rivaling the kingdom, and the warrior says it's because of the name. He goes on to explain that Riel doesn't think the name sounds cool, so he decided he hates the Empire, and that's why he'll never end up there. Though not understanding, his friend changes the subject and tells Abel that they only took on regular missions and those they couldn't refuse, but they didn't go into the dungeon. The warrior says he understands and truly thanks his friends. Rhea says she's very happy that he returns safely, and if they split all the rewards into 4, so we should check the amount later. Abel is surprised and tells his friends to wait because Naomi understands what she just said. He says it's not fair since he wasn't there and that it would be fine for them to split the rewards 3 ways, but his friends say no because that's how their group works. Abel says he just remembered that he also made money and still couldn't carry all the magic stones he collected from defeating the monsters on the way there. But then he says he got Wyver magic stones and asked the guild master to sell them, and as soon as he gets the money, he'll split his profits with them too. His friends are astonished and ask how he got wyvern magic stones. Lina asks if by any chance Abel helped another group or something like that. Abel says no, and that he already told her before. There was a wyvern nest to the south of the Evil Mountains, and they had to defeat those monsters on their way to Loon because it would have been a terrible mistake to leave them there. Still stunned and trying to understand, Lin says that what Abel is saying is that he and Rio defeated the wyverns, and he says yes. While Rio was throwing ice spears at their wings, he waited for the wyverns to fall and then struck him in the eye. While Lin is still trying to grasp the idea that our hero used ice spears on the wings, Ria explains that wyverns use an air barrier around their bodies. And Abel confirms that yes, they do use that barrier. It definitely defeated the wyverns using that tactic. Lin says she doesn't know how, since even Master Hilarion can't use such powerful magic, and Ria agrees with her. Ria then comments that she only knows one person who might match the level of magic Abel is talking about, the Inferno Mage from the Empire, but that's only legend. They say he burned 1,000 kingdoms soldiers with a single attack. They also say he defeated a wyvern with one blow and wiped out a rebel force that had barricaded themselves in a city. Smiling, Abel says he definitely wouldn't want to meet the Inferno Mage on the battlefield. Then, more seriously this time, he also says he wouldn't want to meet Rio on the battlefield. The warrior thinks about how Rio can cast magic without chanting and how he said cool-sounding names, but even Abel knew he was making them up. Besides, making up cool names matched his personality. And on top of his silent spells, he could cast them really fast. He thinks that if he had to face Rio's ice wall, he honestly doesn't know if he could break through it even with his full power impalement strike. Especially because Rio could still use his ice spears from behind the ice wall, and Abel can't think of a single thing that would let him win. All of this without mentioning what he said after they arrived in the city of Loon. He then remembers Rio striking a pose with his sword and saying he could fight someone in close quarters with it. Tired of imagining, Abel says it's not funny, and that even using magic, he still can't see himself defeating Rio. Moreover, with his close combat skills, his very existence is already an anomaly. And on top of that, there's still the Empire's anomaly, the so-called Hell Mage. Finally, Abel comes to the conclusion that making an enemy out of a mage is definitely not a good idea. On the 5th day of the beginner dungeon seminar, someone raises their hand and tells Rio to go ahead. Rio thanks them and asks if there's any teleportation device that lets him reach the last 4 he cleared. Everyone then looks at Rio as he stands there mouth agape. The instructor says that Rio is well informed, and yes, some dungeons do have that mechanism. He goes on to explain that the Loon dungeon doesn't have this feature, but for those that do, exploration resumes exactly where it left off. The instructor says that's what he knows, though he doesn't know the technical details, and Rio thanks him, saying it's no problem. Again at the seminar, Ilman walks ahead of Rio with a sulky look on his face. Meanwhile, Rio thinks he was right to guess, but the Loon dungeon lacked that feature and that it's all good, while Eamon says he's impressed. Feeling a bit awkward, our hero replies that it was just something he was curious about and that it wasn't a big deal. Suddenly, the gates make a loud noise as they open. Everyone enters what looks like a fortified room with iron bars. The instructor had already explained that every few years there's a monster breakout from the dungeon. He goes on to say that they built these bars to keep them from escaping into the city. He presents the double gates and explains that names, gates, and entry times are reported when people go in, and if they don't return, they're considered missing. The instructor says he's already recorded all the students' names and entry times, meaning they're officially going in. Rio then notices something odd at the side end. When he looks over, he sees Ammon trembling and tells him to relax a bit since he's clearly nervous. Our hero moves closer and tells him to take a few deep breaths, and after doing so, Ammon says he feels a bit better. Still thinking the guy looks pretty pale, Rio reassures him, saying everything will be fine because they're all in this together. They then pass through the gates and enter the dark staircase, leading to the dungeon's first floor. Eamon gulps and decides to start descending the shadowy stairs into the dungeon. When they reach the dark first floor, someone comments the place is huge. The instructor explains that only weed monsters appear there, and they can explore, but if they don't return within 2 hours, they'll be considered missing. He adds that if that happens, the missing person will be temporarily banned from entering the dungeon again. Side by side, Rio and Eamon move forward with their weapons ready. Suddenly, our hero senses that something is in there with them while Eamon, panicked, I swear. Freya responds that the target is 1 man away and he'll immobilize it with ice magic so Eamon can strike it with his sword. He says they'll be fine as long as they stop the enemy before it attacks. Moving a little further into the dark cave, they hear a creature. In front of them appears a soldier amp, which Rio remembers seeing in the book the fake Miguel gave him. The beast then advances until it stands still in front of the heroes. Our hero says it doesn't spit acid, so the most effective method is to approach it from the side and decapitate it. Eamon confirms that he understands and prepares to step to the side. Looking at Rio, Amon says he'll do his best. Our boy then begins casting his ice magic and tells Amit he's starting the attack. He stretches his hand forward and begins chanting his spell. Water bubbles start forming above the soldier ant as our boy commands the power of ice to pierce his enemy. Then countless ice spears rain down on the soldier ant's body, pitting it to the ground. At the same moment, Rio shouts for Ammon to flank the creature and cut off its head. Ammon confirms and starts running to the side of the creature. Using his speed, the swordsman strikes with his blade and severs the creature's head from its body. Our hero throws his arms in the air and celebrates while Ammon, still not quite understanding what just happened, stares in shock at the soldier ant he just defeated. Ammon shouts to Rio saying he did it, while Rio congratulates him, telling him he did very well. Rio approaches the ant and says they'll take its magic stone to commemorate Ammon's first dungeon battle. Ammon, in disbelief, asks if he's really sure about that. Rhea replies that he is because they're adventurers, and that's how they earn their rewards in dungeons. The swordsman then says he'll keep that in mind and asks if it's not best for them to head back to the mean point. Our hero says that the slubs will consume all the defeated beasts and clean up the dungeon, and he thinks that the best way to build confidence is by having a successful experience. Mums are raised in the air as they celebrate having found and defeated a soldier ant on their first dungeon foray. Ammon, mouthful of meat, says he only landed a finishing blow thanks to Rio, who stopped the beast so he could strike. Our hero then says the boy's swordsmanship was excellent, and that he doesn't need to be so modest. Nils chimes in, saying it doesn't matter who did what matters is that they celebrate either way. Then, after eating and drinking, Etil and Nils say their team will explore the dungeon over the next 2 days and ask what the boys plan to do. Ammon says he wants to keep exploring the dungeon and will try to find parties to go with, asking whether it's easy or not to find people willing to explore. The boy looks a bit discouraged at the idea of teaming up with random people, while Rio silently mulls something over in his mind. Then our hero turns to Ammon and asks if you'd like to explore together up to the 3rd floor of the dungeon. Clearly excited, the boy says yes. He'd love to form a party with Rio to explore the dungeon. They do admit she's curious why ants are on the 1st floor when it usually only has bats, and Mills says they'd encountered ants there before. The girl remembers and says it's true that over the last 6 months, the guild has been receiving reports that ants have been spotted on floors 1 and 2. The swordsman wonders why that's happening. Noel says it happened to them a while back too, and mentions that the dungeon still hasn't been fully mapped. Someone approaches the table where our heroes are chatting. Abel appears behind the boys and says the ants are showing up because they dig tunnels that let them move up and down between floors more easily. Rio tells the warrior it's not cool for a veteran to mess with rookies like that. The warrior responds that he was just honestly answering the newbie's question. Abel then asks if they're our hero's roommates as he introduces himself properly, saying Rio is strong but has personality issues. Our hero responds that if Abel is trying to provoke him with that nonsense, then he accepts the challenge, while Nose wonders if he's heard the name Abel before. Then he remembers he's Abel the Crimson Sword and stands up to introduce himself as Mills, also a swordsman, emotionally asking the warrior for a handshake. Abel says that's fine and tells the boy to do his best, but to remember that survival is the most important thing for adventurers, and shakes Nils' hand. Rio asks what he does, while thinking how easily the warrior says wise things and shakes hands with others and wonders if that's why he's so popular. The warrior says his last job took him away for a while, so he only got back recently. Just then, Lin shots upon seeing Abel, saying that's where he'd been hiding, while Redia says they still need to report to the guildmaster. Abel, clearly annoyed, says he wasn't hiding, he was just helping the rookies with their questions. Lin then apologizes to our hero and says she's stealing Abel away from them, asking Warren to grab the warrior. Warren reaches out, but Abel quickly says he's got 2 legs and can walk on his own. Ria apologizes again and says they still have matters to handle at the guild, and Rio says it's fine, while in the background Warren grabs Abel and drags him off. Being carried and dragged by Warren, Abel shouts to Rio, but he's a traitor, while also yelling at Warren to stop ignoring him and put him down. Everyone at the table stared wide-eyed at the scene that just unfolded, while our hero watched with a smile on his face. Ammon then remarks that it was an excellent performance. Nils, with a bright sparkle in his eyes, shouts how incredible Abel is in his view. In Lou's dungeon, we see the double subsuri bars on the 1st floor. Next, we descend to the 2nd floor, seeing torches along the walls. Rio tells his ice to pierce his enemies. Then ice spears emerge beneath the beast's feet in front of him, pinning them to the ground. Ammon then prepares his sword attack against the paralyzed beasts. The swordsman brings his torch closer to the bodies of the defeated beasts while Rio follows. Our hero says the swordsman did an excellent job, and the latter thanks him for the compliment. Rio then says he has an idea and that for the next battle, you would like to go one-on-one. He also says that an uninjured opponent provides a greater challenge, and that he will only injure the wolves' front legs, to which Ammon agrees. Then the swordsman asks our hero if he's absolutely sure about that, while Rio asks why. Ammon says he is grateful for the training and the company of our hero, but asks if that's enough for Rio, who tells him not to worry about it. He also comments that the boy's fighting style resembles Abel's and asks if he learned from someone in his old village. Ammon is surprised to be compared to the warrior and says yes, he learned from a former adventurer in his old village. He says he used to call the man Grandpa Kira and that he studied in a famous martial arts school and worked very hard on his farm. He then apologizes, saying that's all he can remember. Rio says you grow much stronger when the fundamentals are deeply rooted in your bones and add that's how Abel is. They then begin moving again through the second floor of the dungeon. As they proceed, the swordsman asks how our hero knows so much about martial arts despite being the mage. Remembering his training with the Delahan, he says he had a teacher who taught him, even though he had his own style, so he doesn't know that much about the subject. Eamon then says it's amazing that he can be both a swordsman and a mage. But then he notices that Rio doesn't always carry a sword with him, so Rio draws his sword and shows it to the swordsman. The swordsman is surprised when he sees our hero's sword glowing faintly in the dungeon. He then asks what it is, and our hero says his master gave it to him, and that it's a sword specifically made for water magic users. Upon seeing the sword, Oman notes that it's made of ice and says that of course without being a water mage, one wouldn't be able to wield an ice sword. He adds that he's never seen anything like it before, as Rio notices two smaller wolves approaching. The swordsman then prepares for battle again. The smaller wolves detect them and charge toward the boys. Rio says he'll injure one of the wolves' hind legs and that after that, the swordsman can strike. Then he casts a water jet and two small ice spears toward the wolves. One of the wolves is hit by the water jet, while the other is struck in the hind legs by the small ice spears. The wolves then leap away, recovering from the attack, while one of them, bleeding from the legs impinged heavily, stares at Ammon. The swordsman stares back at the smaller wolf and begins to approach the target in a fighty stance. Rio watches intently as the wolf and swordsman face each other. He notes that Ammon's fighting style doesn't leave openings for the enemy to strike, but Yit's concerned about the boy's stamina. He also thinks that stamina is something anyone can work on and improve through training, and that it's something the swordsman can develop. And then he remembers that he himself hasn't been practicing his runs while training magic lately. He hasn't trained even once since he left his home in the Rondo forest. Then, panting heavily, Ammon says he managed to defeat the smaller wolf, and Rio, with a smile on his face, congratulates him. Our hero then surrounds the two of them with an omnidirectional ice barrier from floor to ceiling to keep them safe. He says it's not easy for beasts to break through the ice barrier he summoned, so they can rest for a bit. Ammon drops to the ground and breathes in relief, still panting from exhaustion. Rio says there's no need to rush or push too hard and tells the swordsman to drink some water. Now more rested, the boy says he's never seen an ice barrier so thin, and that it's practically transparent. Then our hero explains that it's the impurities in the water and air that make ice look cloudy, like people are used to. He also says that if they could eliminate all the impurity from the water, they could make transparent ice without magic, but in this case, it was made with magic. Ammon says water magic is amazing, while Rio thinks himself and he's doing his part to raise the status of water mages. The swordsman reveals he didn't imagine it would be so exhausting to fight moving opponents, and our hero asks if he hasn't fought beasts before. That Ammon says he only has experience fighting monsters in groups of several humans against a single beast. Rio says now he understands the difference between fighting in a group and fighting a monster alone, that doing it solo is way more stressful. He also says that the swordsman's fighting style wears him out very quickly. He goes on to say that if he improves his fighting style, he'll get hurt a lot less, and that he just needs to train his stamina to get better. Then he says running is the best exercise to improve stamina, and that practicing strikes is good for building arm and shoulder strength. Ammon says his master taught him exercises and stances to train every day. Rio says that if he sticks to all of that with discipline, every day, it'll help him grow a lot. He then shares that he traveled with Abel for a long time, and that even though he's a prodigy, he used to wake up early and train every day. Surprised, the young swordsman is impressed that even Abel had to train daily. Ammon, looking down, says maybe he doesn't have a talent it takes to be a swordsman. Setsurio says he'll tell him what the strongest champion he knows once said when asked what talent really means. Talent is the ability to keep moving forward, that perseverance is what makes you strong, and then he asks the swordsman if he wants to keep going or give up. The swordsman, fired up, says he won't give up and that he'll keep trying. And the next day, with the morning sun rising into the sky, inside room 10, Riel is crouched beside a bed, while we see all the other beds are empty. Next, we see Ammon panting and sweating heavily. Hito and Nils watch from a distance as the swordsman continues his run outside. Then the boy asks the girl if they'll have to run now too, and she confirms that they will. Rio, who was finishing getting ready and had just reached the door, saw both of them heading outside as well. Same moment's happening, he brightens at the scene and hums happily. Next, we see a bag being dropped heavily onto a table as someone says it should be enough. Nina says she has a good book collection and asks someone which books they're interested in buying. Our hero Rio answers that he'd like some books on alchemy. The city of Loon has 2 libraries, one in the north and one in the south, with the southern one being closer to the Adventurers Guild and having more beginner-friendly books. The bookstore had 3 books that interested our hero, but they didn't lend books. It only sold them. The first one Rio wants to buy is a collection of alchemy recipes, but it costs 10 gold coins and he only has 5 at the moment. He then remembers he got the magic stones from the wyverns he defeated, so he decides to go back to the guild for now. Humming happily, Rio walks through the streets and thinks that the magic stones sold for a good price, and Egimoni to work for a while. Not eating to work to have money are words that have never felt so good to think about. Then Rio notices something strange and looks up at the sky. Everyone in the street stops what they're doing and looks up, an incredible solar eclipse beginning to unfold. Our hero thinks he didn't know this kind of event happened in this world. As the sun continues to be eclipsed, someone near our hero wonders aloud what's going on. Suddenly, Rio feels like something has happened, something he didn't expect. Then he stops and stands completely still in the middle of the street. Our hero wonders if he's been thrown into some kind of void or something similar. With the setting of a fantasy world, he feels as if everything around him has disappeared and wonders if he's the only person in that emptiness. He then thinks that if he makes any movement, he might alert others nearby, and he can only think of one thing to do. So Rio exhales and moisture forms in the air around him. Next, he activates his magic and uses the moisture in the air to trigger a sort of sonar. That moisture eventually hits something, and our hero detects someone who seems human size but slightly different. Our hero decides to attack using his powerful 10-layer ice barrier. 10 massive ice barriers instantly appear in front of Rio in quick succession. Suddenly, a voice appears in our hero's mind, wondering if he's caught a human. Our hero then thinks that whoever it is, it broke through his ice barrier and must be strong, but they're still 200 meters away. He then wonders why the voice of whoever it is sounds so close. The voice returns, impressed, saying that Rio is an excellent specimen. The boy remains still using his sonar, waiting to see what will happen next. We are then shown the source of the mysterious voice. It belongs to what appears to be a demon woman with curved horns. The woman says the ice she encountered is formidable, praising Rio's magic. Our hero has been able to visualize her and wonders if she is an Akuma. Suddenly, a massive wave of fire is launched toward our hero, roaring with a deafening sound. The boy wonders if he'll be able to stop such force, while the woman smiles as she attacks him with her magic. Rio creates an ice barrier in front of him to try to protect himself from the incoming attack. After a few seconds, he wonders if the attack is over. Then the barrier in front of him shatters, shocking Rio. As the barrier breaks, a spear of air is launched directly at his heart. The spear hits him squarely, sending our hero flying several meters from the impact. Our hero manages to recover and thinks that was a close one. The woman using this moment to approach him says that her air spear couldn't pierce the boy. Staring at Rio, she says his cloak belongs to the fairy Ting, and maybe that's why her attack failed, adding that he still defended himself well. She then says that in that case, she'll have to cut him down herself. Realizing Akuma's intent, our hero begins to draw his sword. In an incredibly fast movement, the woman appears in front of our hero with her sword drawn, ready to land a fatal strike. Rio barely dodges in time, has little room to react as she's already following up with a second attack. Both begin clashing swords with fierce intensity. The woman smiles as she attacks and parries blows from our hero. In the midst of their exchange, both choose the same moment to cast magic, touching and beginning the Yava power. This causes an explosion, and both are knocked back, stopping their flurry of attacks. She then takes the opportunity to say that our hero can cast spells incredibly fast and calls him a monster. To which our hero replies that coming from her, he'd rather not be called that. She then realizes he can understand her and says he has become very dangerous. We then see a massive explosion as the Akuma said she'll have to kill our hero. As they continue exchanging sword strikes, Rio wonders if she wasn't already trying to kill him before. Amidst the sword fight, our hero conjures an ice spear and hurls it at the Akuma. The woman quickly defends against it as if it were nothing. While she defended, our hero used the moment to conjure countless ice spears around her. To no effect, as both stare at each other while the mist left behind by the water magic begins to clear. She then asked our hero if that's all he's got, and the boy replies, not even close. Rio then conjures a barrage of ice spears and hurls them mercilessly at the Akuma. Next, he uses corrosive water jets against the woman, who raises a barrier to shield herself from the attacks as water falls from the sky. Using all this power and water magic, Rio causes rain to pour down upon the Akuma, soaking the entire city. The one stares at our hero, satisfied that she managed to defend against all of his attacks, standing in the rain he caused. Then she notices something strange about the falling rain just as our hero utters the word boil. The Akuma begins to howl in pain as the rain hitting her skin starts to boil, burning her flesh. In agony, she screams in pain as she focuses on her counterattack. A large explosion erupts around the Akuma, forcing our hero to retreat so he won't be calling it. Then Rio stares intently at the Akuma, starting to grow tired and pant. The woman says that, unfortunately, her time is up and that she can't remember the last time she enjoyed a fight this much, and Rio tells her to leave, noticing that she has regenerated. She looks at him and says he enjoyed it just as much as she did, and that she has no control over the space created during the eclipse, while our hero just watches her cautiously. Then she introduces herself as Leonor Uraka Albuquerque and asks for our hero's name, to which he responds by calling her Akuma. She's surprised and says she should have annihilated him even if it caused her final breath because he knows her true form. Leonor then says she doesn't have enough time and then he can't be easily destroyed, so she bids him farewell, saying they will meet again. Our hero clearly doesn't want a reunion with the Akuma and makes that very clear to her. The woman tells him to stop saying that because with the power he has, he'll definitely run into her again or someone like her, and tells him not to die to the others. Then she says she wants to kill him and that next time they meet, she'll be much stronger. And with that, she says goodbye to our hero. Rio, as if waking up from a dream, returns to the same spot in the city where he had been before being cast into the void. He then wonders if he's really back or not. He looks for a bench and sits down to think about what just happened. He manages to breathe a sigh of relief and thinks that somehow he survived. Then he remembers the last time he almost died in a fight when he faced the killer water that used magic nullification to attack him. But against Leonor, she dodged and destroyed his ice spears like they were nothing. Then a sudden pain in his chest catches his attention. He remembers that's where he was struck by Leonor's air spear and thinks he must have been hurt. So he thanks his master for giving him the cloak, because without it, he probably had a massive hole in his shoulder. Even though the cloak doesn't have a scratch on it, he presses his lips to the spot where he's hurt and immediately regrets it. Remembering his battle with Leonor, he wonders if what she was using to attack him was magic, as it was ridiculously powerful, and her speed was absurd. She could strike him retreat in under a second, as if she were using air magic to move faster. He recalls her mentioning that her time was running out as soon as it must have been because of the solar eclipse. Rio also realizes that maybe that space only existed during the eclipse, and that their fight didn't damage anything in the sea, only the two of them. So he thinks there's a lot about what happened that he still doesn't understand, but right now, there's no time to dwell on it. He needs to buy the alchemy book and return to his room, and also do some research on akumas, even though the false Miguel didn't know anything about them. Then he remembers asking Abel about akumas, and he said he only knows about demons, not akumas. It figures Abel must be some third son of a noble, and if even he doesn't know, finding information about them in this world will be tough. Our hero gets up and decides he'll go buy the book and return to the dorm. Sometime later, as our boy returns to the dorms. Upon arriving at the room, he sees no one there and wonders if they're still training. Nils, panting heavily, says that if he weren't so exhausted, he'd easily knock everyone to the ground. Then a group of 5 people says to him that there's nothing quite like the cry of a beaten dog. Ito says that's a beautiful line coming from people who ambush them. Then one of the men says she must be joking, asking if they're going to expect monsters to announce their arrival or to stop attacking when they're tired. He goes on to say they have to be ready for anything. Rio was walking nearby when he noticed something strange coming from his left. The man gets close to Knowles and says he should be glad this fight isn't real. The warrior then starts cursing at the man, while Rio says that really those who let their guard down only have themselves to blame. Ice spears shoot up from the ground toward the men's backs. The one near Knowles then notices what's happening to his friends. Stepping into the scene, Rio asks if the guy wants to know what happened and explained that he made ice spears pierce his friends from behind. The guy starts trying to curse at our hero, but Rio interrupts him, saying you should never let your guard down. Even asks if he was supposed to warn him before attacking, like he told Mills to do with monsters. Next, our hero says that this is what they get for being lazy, while Mills complains that the whole situation is a pain. He also says they've been doing running training every morning and that from now on they'll do it on weekends to save their energy. Rio calls out to the guy who's been standing there like an idiot the whole time, while Mills says his name is Dan and that he's from room 4. Recognizing Dan, our hero asks what his next move will be, and he's going to run away with his tail between his legs now that his friends were caught off guard. Dan then draws his sword and says he'll never back down. He charges recklessly toward the boys. Rio steps aside and strikes Dan in the ribs with the hilt of his sword. Dan curls up in pain while our hero returns to his friends. Our hero thought he would hurt Dan a lot more if he'd hit him with his hands because of the armor, but he still caused serious damage just using the sword's hilt. Rio then says he was at death's door earlier and maybe the adrenaline from that fight is still running through him and asks Ito to heal his wounds. And it shows her the bruise he got from his battle with the Akuma. Ito says the injury looks bad, but at least there were no broken bones, though she can tell the blow he took was harsh. She added that if it had been closer to his heart, he could have been taken out, then cast a healing spell on our hero. It then says that this is what barely escaping death looks like, and he's just happy to be alive, while Ito asks what he fought against. Smiling, our hero says he'll tell him some other time. Dan from room 4 is still crouched down, writhing in pain from the blow our hero gave him. Rio then thinks about how he was cornered by Leonor one moment, and now he's shown off against F-rank adventurers. A contrast is kind of ridiculous. Later, in the bathhouse, Nils thanks our hero. He goes on to say that if he hadn't shown up when he did, it would have been humiliated, and Ammon says he moved really fast, at least for a mage. Our hero says mages these days can move like that just fine, and Nils tells Rio to stop teasing Ammon like that. Everyone laughs together as they relax and enjoy a well-deserved bath. The Kingdom of Nightly is one of the cities in the central province, and Lune is the largest border city to the south of the kingdom. This is the Adventurers Guild canteen. Noel says that he, Ammon, and Ito are forming a party for the dungeon the next day and asks if Rio wants to join them, but our hero apologizes and says no. Inan says there's something he wants to do in the city. Noel says that's fine. He kind of expected that answer. Rio managed to start his career as a D-rank adventurer right away, and defeating Dan from room 4 so quickly only confirmed what his roommates suspected. The power gap between them is huge, and dungeon expeditions are usually much easier when a strong adventurer is present, but that ends up causing a lot of stress for both the stronger and weaker party members. That's why the guild recommends forming parties with people of similar strength. And our hero came from outside. Usually, those just starting out as adventurers aren't considered particularly strong at the beginning. He was one of the rare exceptions. Even the guild couldn't have predicted someone like him would move into the dorms. The next day, Monday, his friends say goodbye to Rio as they head off to the dungeon. Our hero plans to practice his magic control and stamina by running around the city walls. The day before, Leonor's powerful spells had outclassed Rio's, but his spellcasting speed was better than hers. That's exactly why he wants to use his magic faster and with greater precision. He needs to keep improving his strengths and training his weaknesses until they're no longer weaknesses. Despite that, he felt she was absurdly faster than him. He remembers that Leonor crossed several dozen meters in an instant, and she probably used wind magic to do it. Rio wonders how he could do the same thing, but using his water magic. He thinks he can shoot jets of water from his feet, like he'd need a way to launch himself on his back without breaking his neck. Maybe then he could release a jet from the back of his neck too. That might work. Think him further, he'd have to release a water jet along his entire back, and he could also freeze the ground while flying forward. So he freezes the ground in front of him and thinks that the maximum number of water jets he can use right now is 256. Then he focuses to test his theory. He releases the water jet from his back, but doesn't have the effect he expected. He kneels on the ground and says that he lost, eventually to something or someone. He also thinks that maybe he just can't do it now, but he manages to release 1,024 water jets, maybe he can. Meanwhile, in the dungeon, Nils tells Ito that hunting goes much faster and they have another swordsman with them, especially against goblins. Eamon then says goblins are easier to defeat than smaller wolves because they're slower. No suggests they take a break and recommends licking salt and drinking water, and Eamon brings up that something was said about the salt yesterday, but he doesn't remember what. While Yer performs for healing magic, Nils explains that drinking water and licking salt is a tradition from his village, supposedly something to do after sweating. Eder says she doesn't like how Amon's wounds look, while Mills sits down to rest, saying that this time is a close call. He continues by saying that goblin archers shouldn't exist on the 5th floor, and now that he knows they do, he doesn't feel comfortable going further, and Ito agrees. They'll return earlier than expected, but they manage to loot more than usual, even when splitting the spoils 3 ways. Arriving at the Adventurers Guild Hall, No shyly greets Nana. She asks if they wrapped up early today, and stammering, No says yes and starts to compliment her. Hito then steps in and explains to Maina that they came back early because of a goblin archer on the 5th floor of the dungeon. Shove the magic stone in her hand. Nina confirms that the magic stone is indeed from a goblin archer as she examines it in the girl's hand. Nina says she'll inform the guildmaster and update the section record so others will know, saying she hasn't seen a report like this in years. No starts to say something to Mana again, but Ito interrupts once more, saying they need to sell the magic stones they collected. While the guildmaster is filling out some paperwork, someone knocks on his door and he tells him to come in. Then Nina enters and informs him that news just came in about a goblin archer on the 5th floor of the dungeon. The guild leader stops what he's doing and shocked asks what she said. He then says archers should only appear starting from the 10th floor, and Nina confirms the report. Our guild leader says this must be a sign and asks her which B-rank adventurer groups are currently in the city. Nina then informs him that the Crimson Swords and the White Brigade are in town, while Hugh asks if that includes Feltz and his brigade. She also says they returned 2 days ago and are still in the city, and the guild leader says she should make sure both groups are at the guild within an hour. Abel says that even the White Brigade has been called, and that he's not good at dealing with them. Ria asks how he can say that considering they've known each other since childhood. Lynn says all Abel ever does is complain, and then you should follow Warren's quiet example once in a while. Then the Crimson Swords group arrives at the guildmaster's door and knocks, while a voice inside tells them to come in. Phelps, Heinlein, and Shannon, captain and vice captain of the White Brigade, greet Abel as he enters the room. Abel greets them back, while Phelps says Abel always greets them so stiffly. The guild leader says they probably already know why they were called and thanks them for coming, adding that it concerns the arrival of goblin archers on the 5th floor. The warrior then asks the guild leader how sure he is about that, and the latter replies that he's 100% certain. He then shows the magic stone the goblin archer, and says that 3 F-rank adventurers encountered goblins on the 5th floor, and one of them was an archer. Adel responds that the future looks promising if an F-rank group managed to hunt goblins, even with an archer among them. The leader then explains that it was Nils' group who found the goblins and says they were lucky that he's a level-headed adventurer, one of the bright future ahead. The warrior then asks if that's the group made up of Rio's 3 roommates. Hugh says yes, Nils, Ito, and Ammon, and adds that he had no idea Abel knew them. The warrior then says he met them briefly, and that they'll definitely become good adventurers, since they understand how important it is to stay alive. Then Phelps, the leader of the White Brigade, interrupts their conversation, saying, so that's it. That goblin archers were confirmed to be on the 5th floor, and what does the guild leader want them to do about it? Udam requests that the Crimson Sword and a White Brigade head into the dungeon and check whether another Great Surge is about to happen. The Great Surge is an event where the monster population explodes and beasts that shouldn't appear on upper floors start showing up. So the Guildmaster says he'll pay 100 gold coins now and 200 more once they returned. Abel then prepares to ask a question, just for peace of mind. He asks if all they have to do is check whether another Great Surge is coming. The Guildmaster says yes, and that if they confirm a Great Surge, they should return immediately. He says the plan is to use the double barrier to stop the monsters from reaching the city, then defend with the knights and prepare a counterattack. Next, he says he wants them to enter the dungeon tomorrow morning, and that he'll block new adventurers from entering in the meantime. He adds that the stat from the other guild branch near the dungeon entrance will stop anyone else from going down, and asks if they accept the job. Abel says that the Crimson Sword accepts and Feltz as the stand for the White Brigade. Then on Tuesday, a little after 9 in the morning, someone asks if they received additional information because of their report. That someone is Ammon speaking with Mills, and Mills says the guild put up a notice based on their report. Ammon then wonders where Riel is and remembers that he said he was going to the library. We then see the announcement posted by the guild stating that starting Tuesday, dungeon expeditions are suspended until further notice. A cloudy day in the city of Loon Tuesday, a little after 9 in the morning. Riel decides to try his luck at the Southern Library, hoping to find books about Akumas and learn more about this world, since he lives here now. Meanwhile, Ammon, Ito, and Mills are standing in front of the guild's bulletin board, reading the news that dungeon adventures are suspended. Ito then says they must have gotten more information after their report. Inside the dungeon, Abel meets with Phelps, and after seeing the number of people, asks if 20 is only half the White Brigade. Phelps says yes. He left all D-rank and lower adventurers in the city and only brought C-rank and higher, and says they're ready to move at any time. Surprised, Abel looks to the side and says even the Guildmaster is there too. The Master says he mentioned yesterday that he would stay at the branch near the dungeon entrance, since he'll need to make quick decisions when they return. He then tells them to get going, while Abel asks to wait a moment. Abel says he has a bad feeling about the first floor and asks Lynn to use her wind magic to scan it. Lynn says she will and then casts her spell into the air. Sometime later, she turns and says there are more than 100 monsters on the first floor alone. Phelps shouts that the Great Search has already begun. The Guildmaster then yells for everyone to run to the top of the stairs and alert the Knights' barracks to call for help. After everyone runs back through the doorway, a massive metal door shuts behind them, blocking the entrance to the stairs. A man says that everyone has retreated to the top of the stairs and that the entrance has been successfully sealed. He then looks to the side in fear as beastly claws bend the nearby grate. Band see countless goblins flooding the halls near the entrance. A battle scene follows where a goblin shouts loudly at our heroes. Phelps tells them to use long-range magic and arrows, and that the vanguard will protect the mages and archers from enemy spells and projectiles. Arrows fired by our heroes strike the enemies, and many fall defeated along the way. Meanwhile, at the Adventurers Guild, Nina uses her megaphone to announce that due to the Great Tide, beasts are invading the city, and that long-range attacks are now authorized. Next, we see a row of archers atop the dungeon gate walls preparing their arrows, while Nina reminds them to stay hydrated. Inside the dungeon, Abel says it looks like it's just goblins and some archers, that this will be a battle of endurance, and Lynn says they'll have to defeat them to reach the bosses. The warrior then says it seems that it's only goblins this time and that they won't stop coming until they kill the general, who won't show himself easily. Soon after, a goblin mage appears and someone shouts for everyone to be careful because magical attacks are incoming. A warrior then spots the guildmaster and urges him to head to the dungeon's north wall. Meanwhile, at the north wall, many warriors are entering to clash head-on with the goblins. The guildmaster, seeing the scene, wonders if the knights have already run out of arrows. He then says to join the knights, that together, they can crush this goblin wave of ease. An earth mage begins chanting his spell and asks the earth to be his shield. A stone wall rises in front of Phelps, protecting him from the attacks. The same mage shouts that the goblins will be defeated soon and that mages will start appearing. Phelps then cuts in half one of the beasts, crossing the path of his spear. Abel, exhausted, plunges his sword into the ground in the face of so many goblins. Warren, close to the warrior, hurls goblins into the air with his massive shield. Our warrior then defeats another goblin archer, smiling faintly. He then tells everyone to hold on just a bit longer. The defeated goblin in front of Abel begins to lose its vital essence, while a noise starts building in the distance. Phelps then stops and stares at the far end of the first floor, as does Abel. Behind the fallen goblin, 3 goblins appear, each much larger than normal, and Abel looks at them with unease. With 3 goblin generals appearing and the sheer number of goblins already defeated, it can only mean one thing, that deeper in the dungeon, there is a goblin king. The existence of goblin kings has been reported before. They typically appear every few decades, command thousands of goblins, and are capable of destroying entire cities. And since they already know there are more than 10,000 goblins in this dungeon, the existence of one should have been obvious, even though none has ever been born in a dungeon before. Abel then tells Phelps that he has no idea how strong a Goblin King really is and that he wants to defeat the 3 generals before the king shows up. He says he'll take care of one while the leader of a white brigade handles the other, and the third will be left to the rest of the groups. Then Abel jumps with a swift motion toward one of the Goblin generals. He delivers a close-range blow to the Goblin, but it doesn't seem to affect the enemy much. A mage casts a fireball between Abel and the beast, breaking the melee engagement. Abel manages to create some distance and begins thinking about his next move. The Goblin then launches a fierce attack at Abel, who dodges to the side with skill. He and Phelps then coordinate their strategy, both with the grin of warriors who love to fight. The leader of the White Brigade delivers a spinning attack at one of the Goblin generals. Seconds later, he seems to notice something different coming from the back of the first 4. Abel, noticing the same thing, shouts for everyone to get down. Then a massive white lightning bolt strikes the 3 Goblin generals from the waist up. Our 2 warriors duck and cover their ears as the lightning blasts over their heads. Right after, one of them asks if the Goblin King as a monstrous beast appears, also wondering if it just tried to eliminate them along with its generals. Abel thinks to himself about what that attack was, if it really was magic, and realizes that the opponent only moved his arm and didn't chant anything. He decides it's best to stay close to him. He then shouts that he and Phelps will engage the beast. If they get close to the Goblin King, our warrior is startled by the monstrous attack coming toward him. He shifts his sword to the side and manages to block the Goblin King's strike. Feeling the weight of the Goblin King's blow, Abel struggles to maintain his defense while Phelps sees an opening. Phelps then strikes the beast's arm with his spear while it's attacking Abel. The monster seems to feel the blow from the White Brigade's leader and roars at both of them. Meanwhile, Abel keeps his eyes fixed on the beast. The 2 unleash a brutal barrage of strikes against the monster, fighting with great effort and determination. The beast appears to be taking heavy damage in the battle against the 2 powerful warriors. In a moment of carelessness, Abel trips on the ground and curses as he falls, taking advantage of the opening created by Abel's stumble, but the Goblin King charges at him to strike. Our warrior shouts for Phelps to duck. The White Brigade leader runs toward our warrior, calling out to him. Abel then chants his combat technique, Absolute Shadow. The Goblin King continues his ferocious advance toward our heroes. As it reaches Abel, it begins to ready a punch attack. When it gets close enough, our warrior uses his perfect piercing sword technique and hits the Goblin King squarely. While delivering the blow to the beast, he calls out to Lin to attack while he holds it in place. Lin and Morin, from a distance, see the giant beast Abel is fighting. Right after that, our warrior chants his Absolute Shadow combat technique once again. Then we see the city in the distance as the impact on Abel's technique sends wind and dust sweeping over it. Returning to the dungeon, we see a large dark mark on the ground and Lin looks extremely shocked. The Goblin King, with a massive dark wound on his chest, drops to its knees before our great warrior. The White Brigade leader, Phelps, approaches Abel and sees the beast kneeling with a dark pool around it. Our hero is in complete disbelief at the scene before him. In the tavern, people are packed together celebrating something that Rio doesn't yet know. Everyone cheerful, mugs raised. Aemon spots his friend and tries to get his attention to join them. Our boy walks over to them and Nils immediately says he's going to eat enough for a whole week while Aemon greets him. Aemon, happy, says Rio arrived just in time for the start of the party and then he can eat and drink whatever he wants. It's all in the guild. Soon a delicious plate full of food is placed in front of our hero. Mills, cheerful as always, says he's late and tells him to grab a mug and a plate from the side and eat as much as he likes. Still not understanding anything, our hero finally asks what the celebration is all about. They explain that a great surge happened today, and he learned about that during the summer. It only occurs once every few years. Then Rio realizes that since they survived the great surge, everyone is celebrating the victory. In his thoughts, our hero just wants to make sure he grabs a plate before the boy keeps telling his story. After a while, Nils starts telling how amazing Abel was in the fight, and he's just as skilled with a bow as with a sword, and that he almost defeated the Goblin King on his own. Our hero wonders why he almost defeated the Goblin King alone. Then the other continues explaining that it was Lin who landed the final blow, but only because Abel was holding the beast and shouting for everyone to attack. Rio says it would have been bad if the king had been pierced by Abel, and from what it sounds like, it was a wind spell, one that's hardly ever used, ended up taking down a Goblin King. Eto, who had been sleeping next to Nils until then, wakes up and says it was a spell called Bullet Rain, a very high-level magic that's rarely used. Nils jumps in surprise and looks at Eto, who, a second later, falls back into her food coma and sleeps again. Our hero comments that the name Bullet Rain sounds cool, and Nils agrees, saying it fires dozens of invisible blades and he's just thankful none of them hit Abel. And then a voice chimes in, saying the only reason he wasn't hit was because he dodged them with his combat arts. Abel then appears beside the boys in his heroic pose. Real asks what combat art is, and the warrior says it's a fighting technique. Usually used by swordsmen, the technique Absolute Shadow helps them dodge magical and long-range attacks, and once again, Real thinks the name is really cruel. Abel knew our hero was going to comment on the name. Laughing, our hero says that Nils was praising Abel for his heroism in battle, while the other boy didn't know where to hide his embarrassed face. The experienced warrior says that Nils and his friends were essential, running back and forth to reload the archer's arrows, and without them, they would have lost. The boy, all proud, stands tall, trying to hold back his excitement. Abel says that in any case, they could have won more easily if Rio had been with them, and asks where he was, and our hero says he was at the library. Rio then says he's glad he didn't steal Abel's moment of victory, while Abel tells him to shut up. Lin and Rio arrive, saying they finally found Abel, that they knew he'd be with Rio because he was terribly worried about the boy. Embarrassed, Abel says it's not like that, and that he was just saying how much easier the battle would have been if our hero had been with them. Rio then says there's a message from the guildmaster. He'll be reporting to the Margrave tomorrow at noon, and Abel will have to go with him. Rio then teases Abel, saying that's a grand reward for his excellent performance in battle. Our warrior says it was Lin who delivered the final blow, but the girl tells him to stop trying to dodge responsibility. She says the only reason she managed to land the spell was because he pinned the Dovlin to the ground with his sword, saying that she turns to Rio and says there's something she wants to ask him. She then says that Abel told her he could summon extremely tall ice walls from a distance and asks if that's true. Smiling, our hero says yes and tells her he can create walls up to 40 meters high in the sky above him. Lin, eyes wide, starts to say something while Rio mentions it was hard at first and that he had to train a lot to get to that point. While she's still surprised, our hero turns to the side and tells them to stop what they're doing because it's dangerous. Then a senseless discussion among young adults breaks out as something is knocked over on the floor and they ask for a cloth to clean it up. 5 days pass since the Great Tide battle. A group of 5 hooded individuals walks past Ammon on the street and he instantly recognizes them as the research group. Meanwhile, Mills stands in front of the mission board at the guild headquarters. Sadly, he says there's nothing on the board. Minna, standing beside him, apologizes. She says that over the past 2 days, all E and F rank missions have been taken and the purchasing department has requested that they stop issuing this for a while. Awkwardly, Nils stammers while telling Nina that he knows it's not her fault, but the guild's purchasing department. A bit too loudly, the boy thanks Nina for the hard work she's been doing while Ito and Ammon show up behind him, a bit embarrassed. Rio was walking nearby at the time and they explain that they came to get missions and why there aren't any, that ask if he was looking to buy something. Our hero says he was trying to buy magic copper to practice his alchemy, but the purchasing department isn't selling. He was planning to get it on the 5th floor of the dungeon, so he's not too worried that all the shops in town that might sell copper currently aren't. Edov asks if there really is magic copper on the 5th floor of the dungeon, and Nils asks if it's not too expensive, to which our hero replies that it is. The last time Rio saw on the sides of his fist for sale, it was 500,000 florins or 50 gold coins. Ito explains that the guild doesn't get along with alchemists, as they don't buy magic copper, which makes the product's price inside the city skyrocket. So Rio makes a proposal to the boys, asking if they'd accept a mission from him. He says you can find magic copper in a place near the city, at the abandoned mine near the village of Rusi, about a half-day walk from there. Then he proposes to pay 4 coins per person and 25 for each fist-sized piece of copper, but the condition is that everyone returns safe and sound. The boys promptly accept the mission and Ammon says the conditions are great for them. Rio does the math and notes that it's still cheaper than buying it directly. He also points out that this mission isn't from the guild, so it won't help with their rank, but they say that's not a problem. Suv and the 3 friends head toward the abandoned mine. Of course, our hero could have gone himself, but he wanted to help his roommates earn some money, since he already has plenty, and he doesn't want to just hand it out. While they were off collecting magic copper, he could practice his alchemy using materials he could buy in the city. At the northern bookstore, unlike the southern one, the books found there were more specialized and less general or broad in knowledge. We didn't see Lin walking towards something, a special engraved door that guards the restricted archives accessible only to people authorized by Margrave and B rank or higher adventurers. In those archives, there are many materials and texts that are not to be shown to the public, including high-level spells from every element in forbidden magic. After some time researching, Lin thinks that it's not listed there after all. But she had to be sure there were no spells that created ice walls from a distance. In Essential Nations, all spells used by mages and their incantations are cataloged in books, including the one she used to defeat the Goblin King. In addition to the incantations being long, high-level magic requires an experienced and seasoned mage, or the spell can consume and destroy its user. That's why those books are kept away from the general public. But even so, she still couldn't find any record of the spells Riel has been using in combat. Spells are created by reciting incantations and the corresponding magical effects occur. Anyone with magical aptitude can cast them that way. As they grow more familiar with magic, they start progressing from basic to intermediate and advanced spells. But there is original magic, a kind that requires no incantations, and thinking about Rio, she compares it to a water element version of the explosive fire mage. A fire mage famous for using incredibly high-level magic no one had ever seen or heard of before. She can understand how magic can be used without incantations, and original magic is even less understood. A woman then appears from the shadows behind Lin, saying it's been a while since they last met. Lin starts to turn around to see who had arrived so quietly. She quickly notices a long, thin sword hanging from the woman's waist. Then she recognizes the only B-rank member of the Wind group still in the city of Loom, Sarah. Lin smiles and greets Sarah, the girl that asks what Lin is doing in such an unexpected place. She says she was researching something but couldn't find anything and mentions she heard Sarah was away on some missions from the capital. She confirms and says she was indeed away, but she came back yesterday. She then says goodbye, mentioning the librarian is waiting for her. Lin, frustrated, thinks she might as well head home too. From room 10 of the Adventurers Guild dorm, you can see the courtyard and training area. While Nils, Ito, and Elinman were out on their mission assigned by Rio, our hero was experimenting with new formulas until he finally managed to create his first antidote. Had he made his first antidote, suddenly someone shouts near our boy, asking him to stop. Rio pauses what he's doing and looks to the side, alert, wondering what the shouting is about. We can see Dan for room 1 saying the girl clearly doesn't like it and telling the guys to leave her alone. One man is holding a young woman saying she can serve drinks for them, and if she's good, it might keep her around while they're in the city. Rio sees the scene in the courtyard through a low window. He thinks they're knights trying to take advantage of a young woman who just became an adventurer, around Ammon's age, and he notices Dan standing nearby. The men say that if she lives there, she must be a new and broke adventurer, and if they could help her out, she could keep him company for the night. While the girl screams and refuses, Rio thinks he'd rather not have to intervene. He also thinks there are probably plenty of places in the city where they could go to get their fun. They could have just gone to one of those. Dan then yells at the men, saying the girl said no, and if they didn't stop pushing her, they were going to get beaten up. One of the knights pays attention to Dan and asks him to repeat what he just said. He lets go of the girl, who runs toward Dan and says he's going to teach the adventurers a lesson in manners. The girl runs behind Dan, who protects her, and 2 other adventurers join him. The knight draws his sword and says he's not going to kill a boy, that it's just a lesson, and that Dan should be grateful for it. Dan then faces the knight with another adventurer at his side. Hence, he waits for the moment the knight will charge at him. Suddenly, the knight flips in the air and lands face first on the ground. Dan is in shock, not understanding what just happened. The knight curses while trying to get up and tells the adventurer not to move. Then, raising himself a bit more, he says he'll teach the adventurer a lesson. And once again, he falls to the ground, this time on his back. One of the knight's friends asks Dan what he did to his friend. The boy says he didn't do anything, and that the man is just falling to the ground on his own. Shaking with rage in his voice, the knight tries once more to get up and leap toward Dan. But again, he falls face first on the ground, unable to stay on his feet. The boy remains in shock, watching the man try to get up and beat him down, only to fall each time. The knight's friends stare, frozen, just like the adventurers, all watching without understanding what's going on. Rio watches calmly from his low window. Then Phelps, the leader of the White Brigade, appears and tells them to stop the show. Dan recognizes Phelps immediately, while the knight finally manages to stand. He had rudely asks who the long-haired man is who just showed up. Phelps says that they act like this and still dare to call themselves Knights of the Realm, that they should be ashamed of themselves. The knight, filled with anger, says that an adventurer is trying to teach him about manners when someone interrupts him, telling him to shut up. Phelps says this has nothing to do with being an adventurer. It has to do with being a knight, and that he should act like one. The knight says that no one stands against the Knights of the Realm, and then if they want, they can have the leader of the Adventurers Guild banished from the city. The leader of the White Brigade says yes, he's an adventurer, but he also happens to be a noble of the realm. He then says his name is Phelps A. Heimlein, heir of the Marcus Heimlein family. One of the knights looks at the other in fear upon hearing the name Heimlein, and the other says that the captain of the Royal Knights is named Alexis Heimlein. Phelps then confirms, yes, that's right, the current head of the Marcus Heimlein family, his father. The knight who had fallen retreats to his friends. Then Phelps yells for them to stop dragging the name of the Royal Knights through the mud and to get out of his sight. The boys who were there thank the warrior while he says it's all right, no need to thank him. That the actions of those knights made him angry. He praises Dan for his attitude, telling him to take the girl back to her friends. Rio had still been watching from his low window as the adventurers began to leave. Then Phelps sees him at the window and asks if he's Rio, and Rio says yes, that it's a pleasure to meet the warrior. He says he's the leader of the White Brigade and that he had heard about Rio from Abel, but that it's true, Rio uses some interesting magic. Our hero, Mada, says it's fine. He doesn't have to bring it up if he doesn't want to. Phelps then says all he saw was the knight trying to charge the adventurers and falling to the ground like a fool, all thanks to Rio. Then bowing to our hero and thanking him in the name of the adventurers of Loon, Phelps begins to lean forward, but Rio tells him there's no need, and he has a history with Dan, and that Dan wouldn't have accepted Rio's help even if he offered it, so he had to do something discreet to assist. Phelps then reinforces that just as Abel said, Rio is truly interesting, while Rio wonders what Abel has been saying about him to others. The leader of the White Brigade says that Abel mentioned our hero during the Great Tide celebration, but he kept saying how much easier it would have been if Rio had been there with them. He also said that it's hard to impress Abel enough to make him talk so much about someone. and that he knows Rio was the one who helped the warrior get to the city alive. And not losing a ball would be terrible for the entire city of Loon, and he's very grateful for Rio helping to keep him alive and bring him back. Then a one appears at the door and tells the leader that it's almost time for them to leave. He thanks Rio and apologizes, saying he has to go, but that he'd love to talk more another time. As he watches Phelps leave, Rio says he's tired, though a happy smile appears on his face. Our hero thinks that both the woman who came to get the leader and the leader himself are quite strong and wonders if it's really okay for the heir of an important family to be an adventurer. Sometime later in the Grand Hall of the Adventurers Guild, someone remarks that it's rare to see him dining alone. Our hero says his 3 friends are out on a mission at the abandoned mines, and that even if he sat with Abel, you wouldn't pay for his food. And that actually, as the veteran, Abel should be the one paying for Rio instead, while Abel, flustered, says he has no intention of buying anything for rich Wookiee adventurers. Rio then says Abel is a cruel friend, and that he's overreacting. Our hero says it's rare to see the warrior dining alone in the middle of the Adventurers Guild, and asks him where the other members of his party are, while Abel says just because they're in a party doesn't mean they have to be together all the time. Rio chuckles and says he gets it. Then he reveals that he knows why Abel is alone at that moment. Abel tells him to go ahead and say why he's there alone. Our hero says it's because he's going to visit the Red Light District, and Abel calls him an idiot and clearly gets very nervous. He immediately tells Rio to never say it out loud again, because you never know who might be listening. Rio then says that walls have ears and doors have eyes. Abel replies he's never heard the part about doors having eyes and insists he wasn't planning to go to the Red Light District. Our hero says he knows that's a lie and that he knows Abel regularly visits a certain girl, to which Abel shouts nervously, but it's not like that, and tells him to shut up. The boy says that if Abel wanted anything with Lynn, people would start calling him mean nicknames. Abel then accidentally blurts out that Lynn belongs to Warren and immediately covers his mouth, realizing he let something slip that he shouldn't have. Rio then says it's a pairing of extremes, but as long as there's love, height doesn't matter. Thinking more carefully, our hero begins calculating, and if it's not her, then it must be the other girl. He asks Abel if he's planning to hit on Ria, and Abel, extremely flustered, tells him to stop talking. Rio then thinks to himself that he feels sorry for Ito, who won't even get a chance to express her feelings in the end. Our hero also finds himself thinking that since he came to Phi, he hasn't felt attraction or desire for either men or women, and that he's okay with that. Then Rio asks Abel if he's doing alright, eat only 1 meal at night, and the warrior says that 2 meals would be a bit much. Our hero says that he'd only need to move around a little more, while Abel looks confused. Then Rio says he'll need to do more exercise at night before bed, and Abel asks if he's secretly working for the Red Light District. Ray responds no, while smiling. He says he could be working to stock shady merchants and take their money to give to the poor, while Abel says that's still robbery, even if it's for the poor. Our hero then says the warrior has no sense of humor and decides to stop joking for now. Then Abel says that one of the researchers is a royal member and not all the knights in the escort are good. He knows some of them show up there at night and he wants to catch them. Rio then says he understands, though he clearly looks like he doesn't. He asks how they'll find those knights, and Abel says it's simple. They'll walk around the city, and if they see them causing trouble, they'll beat them up. Our hero says that's a surprisingly solid plan. It's nighttime in the city of Loom, and the full moon shines high, lighting everything. At the Adventurers Guild, someone shouts, outraged, asking what madness is going on, that these people show up and demand all the fruit from the guild and still plan to enter the dungeon starting today, even wanting to break the protective seal. And on top of everything, they're demanding that adventurers serve as their personal guards. Then the guild master ends his speech by saying that even jokes have their limits. A deadly silence follows between the 4 members in the room. Clive Staples, president of the Central University of the Kingdom, says the king appointed Count Harold Lawrence as the leader of the investigation, and that they have a letter granting him full authority. He then shows the letter to the guildmaster, who picks it up from the table. Reading the letter, he says that it does indeed state the guild must provide all necessary support to accommodate the group, but that he can't give away all the guild's food, just as the man was about to thank him for understanding. Plies then asks if the guildmaster knows the meaning of the word accommodate. The guildmaster retorts by asking Mr. President Clive Staples if he knows the meaning of the phrase as much as possible. Then Arthur Varys' court mage advisor asks both men to stop arguing and reminds them that they are all important leaders of the kingdom. He also says that he agrees with Hugh that they should request all the guild's food, and they'll figure something else out, like requesting supplies from neighboring towns. Hugh agrees and says that would help a lot if they did that. Clives then gives in and says fine, he won't bring up the food again, but he won't give up on the dungeon being unlocked for them to enter. Hugh says they don't know what's happening inside the dungeon, and opening it under these conditions could be fatal. The other man replies that the research team was created specifically to examine the dungeon. After a few seconds, the guildmaster says it's fine, but on the condition that they go at their own risk, then he'll ask them to sign documents acknowledging this. Clives is clearly annoyed by the guildmaster's requirement. Q then says that if Clives doesn't like the condition, then he won't open the dungeon. Arthur tells Clives that they don't have another auction. He then suggests to the guildmaster that's okay if they hire adventurers. They still need money to survive after all. The guildmaster agrees, saying they can accept or refuse at their own risk, but warns them not to forget. No one has any idea what goes on inside a dungeon after a great tide. They might find things never seen before, and they should proceed with caution. Meanwhile, in another part of the city of Lune, Rio tells Abel that there's something he'd like to ask him. He says he didn't find what he was looking for in the southern library and wanted to go to the northern one, but doesn't know if there are any restrictions, while Abel explains a few rules. The warrior says the adventurer entry card is black and that Rio shouldn't have trouble getting access. He just won't be allowed into the restricted section. Rio is surprised to learn there's a restricted section, while Abel asks him how lucky he feels to have started as a D rank in this city. Our hero then pauses and asks how popular Abel is in this city, since he seems to be greeting people on the street all the time. Our boy starts to notice something to his left as he says that many adventurers were at Abel's welcome back party. Abel, ignoring Rio's question, asks him what he's staring at so much. Then our hero tells Abel to be quiet as he watches something closely. Pointing at a group walking by, he tells the warrior that those 4 people didn't attend Abel's welcome party. Laughing, Rio says maybe Abel isn't as popular as he thought, while the warrior says he doesn't care about being popular. Abel explains that Lune is the only central city with a dungeon, so a lot of adventurers come from other places, and Rio says the group did look pretty suspicious. The warrior says he didn't see anything suspicious about the group. One of the group members seems to notice they're being watched and turns around. After a while, our hero says maybe they really were invited to the party, and Abel says they're not from around here and probably weren't. Rio breathes a sigh of relief, telling Abel that now they know his popularity isn't dropping that much in the city, while the warrior says he doesn't care about that. As they talk, they walk into an alley behind the strange group they saw earlier, and the sounds of combat break out, then go silent. Rio then says it wasn't very nice of that group to attack them just because Abel is popular, as the group allies defeated on the ground in front of them. The warrior then says that our hero is just jealous of his popularity. Our hero replies that no matter how much people mess with him, that doesn't justify attacking them outright. While Abel kneels to search the pockets of the fallen men, Rio says he doesn't like stealing money, and Abel replies that he's looking for their ID cards. The warrior then finds something interesting and says it looks like an alchemy tool. Our hero gets excited and says he wants it, but the warrior refuses. Rio then asks why, and Abel says it's because it's evidence. According to the card, the man's name is gaming him that he's a C-rank adventurer from the guild in the city of Jacalia. Abel then says that Jacalia is the capital of the Alliance and that something strange must be going on if Alliance adventurers are showing up around there. He then says they should hand the men over to the guards, while Rio jokes that every now and then Abel does something good. Abel says he always does good things, but our hero says he heard Abel had been telling everyone how much easier the Great Surge would have been if Rio had been there. Abel looks surprised and asks how he found that out. We then see Phelps leading an inn and walking calmly through the streets. However, he's being closely followed by someone. His pursuers position themselves behind him and begin to draw their swords. One of the knights says it's time for Phelps to pay for humiliation he made them suffer that morning, and that even if he's strong, he won't be able to handle all of them. The knights draw closer to the warrior with their swords unsheathed. Phelps still doesn't seem to notice that he's being surrounded by armed men. Then, as if sensing something, he closes his eyes. In the next moment, the knights leap at Phelps in a surprise attack, but they all suddenly freeze, not understanding what's happening. They realize their bodies won't move. One of the knights notices something in his leg, something like a needle. Then suddenly, from behind the knight, Phelps asks if he really thought he could defeat him. In shock, the knight realizes that the needle in his leg is what's stopping him from moving. Then a woman says that Lord Phelps let the knight's outrageous behavior slide, and that trash should be burned until it turns to ash. Then stretching out her arms, the 3 knights turn into pillars of fire before her. She then turns and continues walking alongside Phelps. Phelps tells Sheena the mage that she did an excellent job. Returning to the scene with the adventurers from Jacalia, one of them is still conscious. As he starts to get up, he wonders what the hell just happened and says those 2 guys were ridiculously strong. He says he can understand that the guy with the crimson sword was powerful, but wonders who the mage was, saying they never stood a chance. The other man from the Jacalia group seems to notice something near where they are. He wonders if something is burning nearby, seeing the light and smoke. Then as they get up, one of them sees the whole situation turned into a complete mess, and that it'd be better just go back to their rooms at the inn. While the rest of the group gets up slowly and in pain, what seemed to be the leader is already walking. He then turns around and tells him to hurry up and get moving. As he turns back to face forward, he comes face to face with Sheena walking right in front of him. She seems to notice him out of the corner of her eye. The man freezes, recognizing the mage from the White Brigade. As she passes, he starts trembling and whispers an apology under his breath. The mage continues walking ahead and goes on her way while he remains frozen in place. Sometime later, he screams out, asking why this city has so many monsters just walking around everywhere. 6 days after the Great Tide Wave, Rio realizes that everything is still closed and concludes that he will go without breakfast. Then he faces the golden pavilion of the wave and notes that he hasn't stepped there since Abel's welcome party. Inside, the blonde girl complains about the absence of the crimson blade, as they had left about 30 minutes ago, according to an old lady. Soon after, the girl asks if they could still catch up with them, but the old woman says they just left at that moment. Next, the girl notices Rio, grabs his cloak and makes him turn around. Excited, she calls him Big Brother, but the young man immediately denies it. Without wasting time, the girl with bangs asks if he is an adventurer, as she needs to go to the guild for a mission. Then Rio explains that by following that street, she will get there, while the blonde comments that it's her first time. In one breath, she talks about the professor, who asked her to deliver a letter to Abel of the Crimson Blade, and the adventurer warns that it won't be simple. Even so, the two head to the guild and find Abel at the door. Rio explains that the young girl really wants to deliver the letter, making it clear that she is not a fan. Skeptical, the leader comments that it seems like a joke until the blonde hands over the letter from Professor Ilarion from the royal capital. In light of this, Abel says it's better to read it quickly and invites them to sit in the dining room. He calls Rio, and the girl introduces herself as Natalie, receiving the invitation to stay as well. Meanwhile, in silence, Lynn watches everyone gather around the table. Curious, she asks if Natalie's last name is Schwarzkopf, and the answer is affirmative. Then Lynn comments that that family masters water magic, making Rio think it's the first time he sees another user besides himself. The girl with bangs says she trains every day to improve, but still thinks she is terrible. With a tired face, Abel stares at the letter intently. Soon he explains to Rio that the professor asked for help with the search team when they enter the dungeon. Confused, the other comments that he thought the place was closed. Abel explains that the big shots must have negotiated the reopening, leaving the guild with no choice. Frustrated, he adds that the kingdom sent the search team and hired experienced adventurers. Then Rio asks if Abel is feeling unwell or just worried about the dungeon, since everything got harder after the wave. Abel says his stomach is fine, but the problem is another, because entering the dungeon after the Great Wave is prohibited, as a strong team disappeared inside some time ago. Thus, it became a rule to close the place for a month, and Rio asks why there is still doubt. Abel explains that the events after the wave are unpredictable, making any incursion dangerous. In light of this, Rio decides not to get involved and announces that he will look for breakfast. Surprised, the leader says they could just eat right there. But he soon understands upon realizing there is no food, and Rio comments that the search team took everything from the cafeteria, even thinking they brought their own meal. Natalie hears Abel say that if this leaks, it will be hard to recruit new people. At that moment, Ria asks if the opening of the dungeon cancels the hunt of the day, and the leader confirms. Finally, he suggests they stay in the city. Lynn comments that Sarah went back there, and Rio takes the opportunity to announce that he is leaving. Abel informs the protagonist that he can eat at the Golden Pavilion, and he comments that he intended to do that until Natalie appeared in his way. Then the girl apologizes, but he replies that she seemed in a hurry, so it's all right. Even so, the Bangs girl still feels guilty, while Lynn asks for her opinion on something specific. As a member of the Schwarzkopf house and a water magic user, Lynn asks if there is any spell capable of creating a suspended ice wall in the air, but Natalie admits she doesn't know anything like that. Thoughtfully, Lynn agrees, and soon Abel asks if she is still thinking about that, receiving in return a completely insane expression. Suddenly, the girl shouts that there is no wizard in the world who wouldn't be interested in that, leaving Natalie curious. Meanwhile, the curly-haired girl comments that the leader saw something similar, but Schwarzkopf insists that it should be impossible. Then Natalie wants to know where that happened, and Abel explains that it was during a trip. Hesitant, the adventurer says he wants to tell something, but he needs to be sure it will stay just between the two of them. Without beating around the bush, the Bangs girl assures him that she won't tell anything, and even suggests a contract. Spell. Cautiously, Abel reveals that Rio created an ice wall in the air and crushed a golem with it. Then he makes it clear that the boy is absurdly powerful, to the point that even Ria, Lynn, and Warren together couldn't defeat him. Therefore, if one day he becomes an enemy, the best thing to do is to surrender. Right after, he reinforces that it is an order, and everyone agrees, while Natalie is confused by the idea of someone being that strong. Then Abel completes by saying that if she really needs help and no one is around, she should call Rio, who usually stays in room 10 or in the library. However, he warns her to never lie, as the boy sees through falsehood and can destroy her, although he is a good person when treated with honesty. Meanwhile, Rio himself walks through the corridors with his stomach growling from hunger. Shortly after, our hero arrives at the pavilion and finds a note saying that the person in charge will be back soon. Then, a man runs up to him apologizing. He then hands over the admission pass, leaving Rio visibly excited. After that, the boy walks through the long and wide corridors of the library. For a moment, he seems lost, until he notices a girl with large pointed ears. Smiling, she asks if he is also an adventurer and introduces herself as Sarah. In response, Rio confirms and introduces himself back. Next, Sarah explains that the librarians are helping with the dungeon investigation, so for now, any questions can be resolved with her. Soon after, the adventurer asks if he has seen a man with a monocle, explaining that he is not a librarian, just someone sent by the castle. Thoughtfully, Rio considers asking about the Akuma but decides against it, not knowing how she would react. He then decides to ask about books on alchemy, as he is not very good at it and needs to learn to control golems. Surprised, Sarah says that this is a huge ambition and that there aren't many alchemy books focused on that subject. Still, she comments that there should be some copies and asks him to follow her. As they walk, the adventurer confesses that he has always loved reading, but since arriving in Phi, he has only had access to books about monsters and plants. Now, surrounded by endless shelves and being helped by a beautiful woman, he feels that it is almost too much. In another location, raised voices echo, saying that they cannot accept that situation. They complain to the boss that someone thinks they can boss them around after stealing all the food, and that no one wants to go to the dungeon after the wave. Moreover, they shout that they are not slaves. Calmly, the man responds that he understands the stress, but reinforces that everyone is just helping the search team as requested by the guild. He says that they just need to look at the list, and if they don't want to go, no one is obliged, as each adventurer is responsible for their choices. However, he makes it clear that he will not tolerate insults calling others traitors just for accepting the requirements. Then, someone raises their hand to ask a question to Hugh. That someone is Abel, who requests that the Crimson Sword go to the dungeon along with the real magical body, formed by the best mages. He suggests that this group advance first and send information to the rest. Hugh thinks that this was expected coming from that leader and states that the brave who accept the request will not suffer punishments afterward. Finally, he informs that the dungeon will open tomorrow at 7 in the morning, with frequent updates on the notice board. While walking alongside a woman, Hugh comments that there will be another meeting tomorrow, this time with the weaker adventurers, at 9. Curious, she asks if they will be able to accept requests from the search team, but the man replies that no, as there will be a month of waiting. Soon after, the woman asks Rio if Niels and the others are coming back today, and he confirms. Then she mentions the 9 o'clock meeting and asks if he intends to participate. Our hero replies that he will attend, but she notices that the young man was not at today's meeting, leaving him confused. Then the protagonist comments that he didn't know about it, and she explains that since he just registered, he can participate in the meeting for the weaker ones afterward. Happy, Rio greets Niels, Eto, and Amon. Right after they show that they found what was requested, 2 quite large oars. For the payment, they ask if the hero could raise the amount a bit as they manage to get an extra and share the room. Without hesitation, Rio agrees. After all, they worked hard and brought more than necessary. Then he asks if 900,000 florins for the 2 oars is fair, so each would get 300,000. For a moment, everyone is speechless at the absurd amount, but the deal is closed. Satisfied, Rio says that he will go to the guild later to transfer the money, thanks them for their work, and takes the opportunity to comment on the opening of the dungeon. He then explains that entry will only be for the search team to conduct studies, allowing access only to contractors with requests restricted to rank D. Upon understanding the situation, they realize that they will not be able to enter, and the hero still comments that he missed the meeting because he was in the library with a beautiful elf. The next day, at 7 in the morning, Lynn is in front of the dungeon trying to detect signs of life by sensing heartbeats. However, she doesn't notice anything, as after the Great Wave, no creatures remained there. The probe used by Lynn consumes magical power according to the extent of the search. For example, if the scan reaches the 5th floor, the limit would be 3 uses, still requiring caution in case something goes wrong. Then Abel orders everyone to thoroughly explore the 1st floor, perhaps advancing to the 3rd. Meanwhile, Rio attends the 9 o'clock meeting. The chief thanks everyone for their presence and explains that E and F rank adventurers cannot accept requests from the search team, as the state of the dungeon is still unknown. The Crimson Sword has already entered and is sending information that will be updated on the bulletin board. Even so, he says that no one needs to be discouraged, as there are still jobs like guarding the gate, transporting food, and other tasks. At this moment, Rio raises his hand to ask a question about the Great Wave. Then the protagonist questions whether the stones left by the destroyed monsters, especially the Goblin Generals and the Goblin King, were light or dark. Praising the observation, Hugh explains that the color of the stone depends on the type of magic of the monster, like green wind, yellow earth, and so on. However, he adds that these colors can vary between light and dark shades. The darker the stone, the longer the monster lived, and the more experience it accumulated. If it is light, it indicates that the creature is recent and did not come from deep floors. In other words, the king and the goblin generals have not existed in the dungeon for long. Moreover, there is a theory that the dungeon itself creates the monsters. If this is true, they appeared in a short time, which is strange considering the level of power they possessed. While in the forest, Rio tried to imagine where the magical water came from. The first thing that came to his mind was Einstein's formula, which shows that it is possible to generate energy from matter. On the other hand, it is also possible to create matter using energy. So, if the dungeon does this, the question arises about where enough energy comes from to sustain the process. If the Great Wave generates absurd amounts of monsters, this energy must have a source. There is only one possible answer, but Rio prefers not to think about it. In the end, Hugh wishes everyone good luck and ends the meeting. Later, alone in his room, he hopes that the next month passes without major problems. Additionally, he reflects on how the hero has good instincts, asking more relevant questions than many from the search team itself. As for Rio, knowing the opinions of the guild leaders, he remains intrigued by the color of the stones, a topic he had already discussed with Abel. More than 30,000 monsters have recently appeared, and Hugh has no idea how this is possible. As a precaution, he thinks about talking to Commander Neville in case something goes out of control, although the man is an incurable drunkard. To that end, he imagines bringing a bottle of alcohol as a gift, perhaps his 30-year-old malt. Even though logic suggests another approach, the emotional side often increases the chances of success. On Earth, this would be seen as bribery, but in Phi, it is perfectly acceptable. Hugh knows that small gestures maintain healthy relationships and can change the course of events. Meanwhile, Rio's curiosity only grows, linking the Great Wave, Akuma, and the eclipse. After all, 2 days before the wave, there was a solar eclipse in Runa, just when he was fighting Akuma in a corridor, too much of a coincidence to ignore. Perhaps she already knew all of this upon arrival, but the protagonist is not sure. Pensive, Rio wonders if he can find any clues about this in the library. At that moment, a colleague asks if he is deep in thought for some reason. Soon after, another questions whether the subject is money. Then the third believes it is about the oars. Ignoring the teasing, the protagonist asks Niels what that is in his pocket. Then the young man explains that, as an adventurer, he needs it very much, a pocket watch, since delays ruin any reputation. In Phi, there are things that do not exist on Earth, like magic and alchemy, so making one of these is simple, although it costs around 10,000 florins. And that only applies to the most basic models, as some can reach millions, while fully mechanical ones, without any magic, can be worth billions. Excited, Rio is happy to know that his friend will no longer be late. However, Niels comments that he has never been late before, but is interrupted when someone approaches, apologizing for interrupting lunch. Soon after, the woman announces that Niels and Ato participated in the battle against the Great Wave and have risen to rank E. For a moment, everyone is incredulous, until joy takes over the group. Next, she asks the two of them to go to the reception to pick up the new cards and officially register the team, choosing only one name. Beside them, a girl from another group comments that she will have to work even harder to rank up. Meanwhile, Rio thinks that, with Amon next to Niels and Ito, they should evolve quickly. After that, the protagonist heads straight to the Grand Library. However, he notices that there are still no librarians around, and Sarah is also nowhere in sight, which worries him since he wants to research eclipses and great waves. At that moment, Sarah calls his name, visibly embarrassed to still be alone in the place. Happy to help, the elf listens to Rio's question and asks if he sees any connection between the two phenomena. Attentively, the boy realizes that she is quite clever, while Sarah comments on a solar eclipse that occurred 2 days before the monsters appeared. Then Rio explains his theory involving the city of Runa, since eclipses tend to happen before the Great Wave, although they are usually partial. Depending on the position of the moon, a total eclipse can occur, which is rare, while partial ones happen every 2 years. Sometimes this phenomenon occurs close to the Great Wave, which could just be a coincidence, or perhaps not. Curious, Sarah admits she has already researched the topic, but says her interest has now increased upon realizing that Rio sees a real connection. Laughing, the boy understands that he cannot talk about the fight against Akuma, so he changes the subject and asks why some magical stones are darker than others. Moving closer, Sarah joins in the fun, commenting that he switched topics too quickly. She explains that the longer a monster lives, the darker the stone becomes, and that the ones from the Great Wave should be light. Agreeing, Rio hears from her that she studied ancient records and that, in all past waves, the stones always showed light shades. In fact, many of these documents are so old that most librarians don't even know them, so she promises to show him everything. Meanwhile, there are no issues on the 7th floor of the dungeon. Arthur comments that he expected to find something more relevant, since there were bats on the 1st floor, werewolves on the 2nd and 3rd, and some goblins on the 4th and 5th. Still, Abel wants to go deeper, although he can't shake off the question about the light stones. Rio mentioned it so many times that he ended up making the leader obsessed. Reflecting, Abel comments that the number of goblins is enormous, which would only make sense if they came from the 15th floor. Then Arthur lists all the floors where these creatures usually appear. So far, they have only found large concentrations of mana from a few days ago, perhaps linked to the Great Wave. In any case, the alchemical tools are impressive, as they can detect magical residues even after days. All the information is sent to the surface for analysis. Some comment that alchemy copied the concept of the magical wind probe, but it was actually the result of collaboration between two geniuses. By repeating the word alchemy, Abel catches Arthur's attention, who asks if the topic interests him. Not denying, the leader says he has a friend quite involved with it. Surprised, Arthur comments that now even leaders have friends, and that becoming an adventurer was indeed a good choice. Soon after, Abel comments on the hurry of the people from the Central University of the Kingdom. Rikia confirms, saying they believe the wave monsters emerged on the 38th floor. She explains that the expectation is to find something alive down there, information she received from an old colleague. In light of this, Abel questions whether it is right to spread secrets to people outside the search team. Calmly, Ria responds that there is no problem, since everyone needs priests, and favors are part of the game. Moreover, the university researchers are not even from the city, so it matters little. It could end up being a waste of time, since they don't know the dungeon well, but at least the adventurers from Runa will make money. Finally, Arthur comments that Clive's group is advancing quickly, perhaps already heading to the 10th floor. Ria reinforces that if the monsters really came from the 38th, it is very likely they will continue descending. In other words, Clive will end up being the canary in the mine. In his group, someone warns that the 10th floor is goblin territory, but the man says that doesn't matter. Focused, the old man explains that the monsters came from much deeper, so the order is to keep descending. Clive wants to solve the mystery of the Great Wave and become the next president of the Academy, the most prestigious position of all. Additionally, the position gives total authority to distribute funds among the institution's sectors. If the old man with the monocle can make a great speech about the cause of the phenomenon, the position will practically be his. In fact, that was the only reason he left the royal capital for this distant place. Someone comments that the resistance of many has already ended, including researchers. In response, Clive says that, because they are students, it doesn't mean they shouldn't stay in shape. Thus, the group decides to stop on the 10th floor and set up camp. On the 5th day, the university's search team had already spent an entire day on the 10th floor. Even so, no problems were reported, and apparently there was nothing there, while Arthur's group continued analyzing mana residues. In deep explorations, certain roles are essential, such as the scout, responsible for identifying traps. However, the Crimson Blade does not have one, relying only on Abel, the swordsman, Riya, the priestess, Warren, the shield, and Lynn, the sorceress. Still, in the past, they explored areas beyond the 30th floor. At that time, Abel dealt with the traps, although he wasn't trained for it. Since he couldn't disarm all of them, the group had to dodge several. Unfortunately, in recent years, they only undertook missions on the surface, and that skill has weakened. Some believe that the traps are created by monsters, but this theory has been losing strength. In the dungeons of Lun, traps with poison and pits are common, making the scout indispensable. Confused, they realize that there are no monsters or traps in the area. Perhaps the right point is the 11th floor, not the 10th. Ria suggests that the creatures may have moved during the morning. Meanwhile, the nearly 100 people in Clive's group, believing that the monsters from the 38th caused the flood, have already reached the 12th floor. In their haste, they find something impossible to ignore. In the center of the area, a huge dark portal connected to another unknown space emerges. Immediately, Clive decides to call it a gate and believes it is linked to the Great Wave. Now, the team begins to use equipment to investigate. No one has ever seen anything like it, and they soon realize that the chances of it being the origin of the wave are enormous. The man with the monocle did not expect this, but chance played in their favor as they arrived before the other groups. The team organizes itself, using their instruments to extract as much information from the gate as possible. Suddenly, something emerges from the structure, startling the leader. It is a mysterious figure, covered by a hood. For the investigation, 3 different organizations were mobilized. The first is the Royal One, led by Clive. The second is the court's magical team, led by Arthur. The third is the university's magical team, Slower, under the command of Professor Christopher Bratt. Even so, Christopher receives abundant information, as he has spread spies among the other two teams. From the beginning, Clive was the most motivated, as his ambition to become director was known to all, although no one cared. With the old man in the monocle in charge, the other teams needed to appoint someone with equivalent authority. Being used politically is acceptable, but losing people in battles would be a disaster. Clive's more experienced team could treat the others as disposable pieces, which is why both sides avoided this approach. Moreover, Arthur is someone even the old man in the monocle treats with caution, as he is an extremely experienced mage. On the other hand, Christopher endures both praise and criticism, making him the most likely candidate to lead the university in the future. Exactly for this reason, he was sent, with the main mission of preventing human losses. Discovering something about the Great Wave would be just a bonus. Known for keeping his promises, the professor already had his own plans. He never pressured the more focused researchers, which is why he is well regarded by all. It is no surprise that many expect Christopher to become the next dean, even without trying too hard. It was also no coincidence that the timing of the operation was right, as the information about the gate had arrived recently. Reflecting, the professor decides that the central team will conduct the research while they observe from a safe distance. The only risk would be someone questioning how the university already knew everything. While the magical team totals nearly 1,000 members, only 50 entered the dungeon. The rest are about 100 rank C adventurers. As there were no higher rank fighters available, the university had to hire rank D adventurers to advance to the 11th floor. Still, Christopher knew that the supply route was secure, as there had been no need for the magical team to intervene from the start until then. When the professor arrives at the entrance, he notices that the place is completely empty. Then, in a hurry, he orders everyone to leave immediately. Alert, the old man understands that this investigation will require much more work than he imagined. At another point, Natalie observes the instruments, while someone comments that the detector simply disappeared. Meanwhile, the sensor indicates something on the 40th floor, but the signal fails from time to time. Without hesitation, Christopher orders to notify the guild immediately. Soon after, he introduces himself and asks who is in charge. The man replies that it is him. Directly, the professor explains that he speaks as an authority and wants to know if any anomalies occurred within the dungeon. Without an immediate response, Christopher decides to share everything they know so far. He reveals that a person disappeared inside the dungeon, and, by the reaction of the girl present, the disappearance is confirmed. He then asks if the magical team was on the 10th floor. He explains that, as they work alongside the magical university, he understands how tracking works, likely based on wind magic. Soon after, he questions whether any signals were picked up after the disappearance. The man confirms that there was a brief return, but the connection dropped shortly after. Christopher asks for the exact location of when this happened. Upon hearing it was on the 40th floor, the professor looks visibly shaken. He believed that the adventurers had only reached the 38th, although it wasn't impossible to go further. Still, after the 30th, even rank B teams face difficulties, and theirs consists of 100 rank C adventurers. There is a chance that the Crimson Sword has also disappeared, making this group the largest active force in Lune. Even so, reaching the 40th floor would be extreme. Christopher comments that he has already arranged contact with the Adventurers Guild and asks them to relay the information as soon as possible. At that moment, Hugh's assistant rushes into the room, warning that there is a serious problem. Exhausted, the chief asks what it is about. She explains that a team has disappeared and that the guild leader needs to go immediately to the dungeon entrance. Startled, Hugh's eyes widen, and he says he will go right away. Before leaving, he orders that everyone remain on standby, and that only the liaison officer go to the forward post, without alarming the adventurers. On the way, Hugh reflects on how someone can simply disappear, and is especially worried about Abel, refusing to accept him as lost. Upon arriving, the old man asks the other elder for more details. Christopher explains that everyone inside the dungeon vanished at the same time, some literally before the eyes of others. Additionally, adventurers tasked with bringing supplies were waiting on the first floor and also disappeared. To make matters worse, a magical object was detected for only 1 second on the 40th floor. Hugh ponders that, even with 100 rank C adventurers, getting there would be impossible under normal conditions. He asks if it's true that there were no monsters from the 1st to the 11th floor, and Christopher confirms, although no one knows why. Not knowing if the people are still alive, Hugh states that he cannot send more people in that situation. In light of this, they decide to temporarily cancel the contract with the adventurers. In a dark and unknown place, Abel asks if his team is okay. He then questions whether Arthur's group also survived. Analyzing the environment, he realizes that everyone was forced to teleport to a location with no apparent connection. Even so, the sensors are functioning normally, indicating that data is still being sent to the surface. Excited, Lin says this means they will be able to rescue everyone. However, Arthur doesn't seem convinced and asks Rhea if this place seems familiar to her. Thoughtfully, she explains that it resembles the Formation Sanctuary, a sacred technique used only by high-level priests. It is a total protection spell, capable of nullifying any physical or magical attack. Abel summarizes by saying that, in other words, they are trapped inside a gigantic magical barrier. Rhea adds that the field is so vast that they can't even see the end. Then Abel asks Lin to use tracking magic and check the area around them. She does so and detects about 500 meters away, approximately 1,000 humans and 50 unknown beings. Arthur suggests that this must be Clive's group. With no alternatives, everyone agrees that they need to move forward. Thus, Abel takes the lead and advances through the grass under a dark and strange sky. Meanwhile, Clive is exhausted and completely confused. Suddenly, several fireballs begin to be launched at his team. Without wasting time, he orders the mages to conjure a magical barrier, the most basic spell there is. Everyone obeys, but the impacts are too strong. Alarmed, the chief asks what kind of creature that is. An adventurer responds that he has never seen a monster like that, commenting that it must be because of the tail. However, what they are facing are not common monsters, but huge demons with long tails and turtle-like heads. Some of them have long and frightening horns, and they all slowly advance toward the team. Clive comments that he only knew about them from books, but their appearance matches the descriptions exactly. There are 50 demons, something that seems almost like a joke, as they are part of legends heard by every adventurer. According to the stories, they are enemies of gods and angels, creatures almost immune to magic and impossible to defeat for ordinary humans. Meanwhile, the mages maintain the barrier, and the priests focus on healing. Then, other conjurers join in and cast a massive magical lightning bolt at one of the demons. The attack hits hard, but the creature barely moves. At that moment, the Crimson Sword and Arthur's team arrive on the scene, noticing the presence of demons, something extremely rare. Seeing Clive's team in critical condition, Abel orders his adventurers to fire from the flanks. Everyone prepares and executes the unified triple magic shot. The strike hits with full force, but the demon remains intact, smiling menacingly. Rhea comments that certain magical attacks do not work against demons. Arthur explains that 3 spells in unison can break through their barrier, but not when the defense involves wind. Unfortunately, there are too many enemies, and ranged attacks consume too much mana, making it impossible to defeat them all this way. In light of this, Abel decides that the combat will now be hand-to-hand. They organize into formation, with Warren and his shield leading. Then they charge forward against the monsters. With this, they manage to split some of them in half. Warren protects the front line, followed by Abel with the sword, while Lin and Rhea provide support just behind. Still, the number of demons is far too high. Before long, Lin runs out of mana, and Rhea asks Warren to cover her. The warrior's shield is enormous, but the size of the enemy is also impressive. Taking advantage of an opening, Abel flanks, tears off the creature's arm, and drives the sword into its chest, causing the body to explode. Analyzing the situation, the leader says there is a boss, 3 minions, and 2 smaller ones. However, Rhea warns that there is a chance the boss is a demon prince. He would have the potential to become a demon king, and only 4 can exist at the same time. According to records, something like that could only be defeated by the hero, and there are no reports of this happening. Even so, Abel decides to eliminate all the others and leave the prince for last. Perhaps by defeating the others, the barrier will break, being their only hope. The adventurer realizes he has never faced anything so brutal, not even when he faced the griffin, so the plan is to clear the weak first. However, the prince advances, jumping forward and pushing the other enemies aside. Abel notices that the creature ignored everyone just to face him head-on, showing pure thirst for battle. With a threatening smile, the demon stares at the young man. Under normal circumstances, Abel would never reach him without eliminating everything around, but now they are face to face. Still, winning seems almost impossible, as the prince attacks immediately. The leader jumps back and realizes that the monster's speed and strength exceed human limits. Moreover, the enemy fights with technique, confident enough for a direct duel. Clive's team tries to attack the prince. However, the blows barely have any effect. Rhea realizes that the spells are being reflected, and Arthur concludes that although the unified shot works on common demons, this one is completely resistant to magic. Even so, Abel uses the zero-spin blade technique. The prince easily defends and counterattacks with a brutal punch, making the hero fall to his knees on the grass. For a moment, the leader believes he will not win that battle. Then, for his salvation, a huge rock rises behind the demon. From the hole opened in the ground, Rio emerges, levitating with magic. The demon prince watches the scene with a curious smile. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Natalie runs up the stairs. She remembers Abel's words, telling her to call Rio if she needed help. The boy was preparing potions when Natalie screamed for help. Without wasting time, she explains that the Crimson Sword and other adventurers have disappeared inside the dungeon. Rio responds that they can talk on the way. During the cart ride, Natalie tells everything that happened. Confused, the boy asks why she called him. The fringe girl replies that Abel trusts him a lot. Even though he is prevented from entering the dungeon, Rio decides to move forward anyway. Upon arrival, he realizes the place is empty and feels a bad premonition. Soon after, he notices the presence of a barrier, denser than any he has ever seen. Levitating above, the hero sees the demons below and wonders how Abel is still standing. Without hesitation, Rio creates ice walls in the air and launches them with full force at the monsters. Then, he descends to the ground and asks if Abel is injured. The leader, confused, questions why Rio is there. Then the adventurer replies that he came to help and asks again if he really can't stand anymore. Then the leader responds that it was just the impact. He tripped. Next, Rio says it would be best for Abel to go home for now, and the leader agrees. But there is no way to leave. Without beating around the bush, the protagonist assures that he will take care of everything. However, Abel reinforces that the creature is a demon prince. Rio thinks it's a joke, but the leader insists, saying he can become a king in the future, besides being extremely strong. At that moment, the boy realizes it makes sense. He might be a direct descendant of the king, which is why he still seems immature. Soon after, 3 demons attack Rio at the same time. Without moving, he creates ice spears and blocks all the blows. Then, he defeats all 3 instantly. Shocked, Abel thinks he didn't even see the boy react. The prince begins to show fury. Calmly, Rio comments that he is already used to that look. Then he provokes the monster, saying he would be impressed if it managed to hit him. Irritated, the demon charges at high speed. Even so, the attack seems slow to the protagonist's eyes. In the blink of an eye, Rio decapitates the prince with an absurd blow. Still, the creature regenerates instantly, something expected, although a king would be much more resilient. Rio observes that he is weak, despite the good regeneration, but that doesn't change anything. Determined, the young man decides to test the limits of this ability. Then he launches several ice spears, opening multiple holes in the monster's body. This time, the regeneration fails. Tired, Abel asks if the magic stone was destroyed, as he heard a crack. Rio replies that it shouldn't be a big problem. After that, he walks across the battlefield. At that moment, Arthur picks up a dark magic stone, his first demon stone. Curious, Rio asks if he has faced demons before. The old man replies that he tried to defeat one in the past, but failed. Normally, the stones reflect the attribute of the monster, so the dark tone must represent the element of darkness. However, Arthur remembers that the demons used fire during the attack. Rio comments that it has been 20 years since the last appearance of one of these beings, and there are almost no records about their magic stones. The protagonist reflects that this involves space-time magic, recalling what Michael said about there being 6 elements and 1 beyond them. Then he asks if techniques like infinite storage and teleportation really exist. Excited, Rio shows great interest in learning about this. Abel explains that, in the Central Nations, only one person masters this type of magic, Baron Hagen Benda. With teleportation and infinite storage, hunting becomes quick and efficient, in addition to facilitating the transport of materials and magic stones. The leader comments that this would be ideal for an adventurer, but the Baron belongs to royalty, and the kingdom would never allow total freedom to someone so powerful. He is responsible for transporting royal weapons, being treated more as a valuable resource than as a person. According to rumors, Benda only awakened this magic after the death of the former Baron, almost like a cursed inheritance. Rio understands that it is a skill passed down through generations. Meanwhile, thousands of kilometers from Lune, a mysterious orb begins to glow. About 4,000 kilometers from any city, someone comments that they have finally arrived. A blond man named Roman stares at the place with a determined look. Soon after, a dark portal opens. From within it emerges Akuma, also known as Leonore, murmuring softly. She says she felt something strange and went out to investigate, realizing that it is an artificial altar. Roman declares that the Demon King will be destroyed right there. Irritated, Akuma questions if he really called her that. The blonde explains that building an altar requires many sacrifices and that by doing so, the king appears. She comments that it took a lot of work and asks his name. Roman introduces himself and claims he will be the one to destroy the Demon King. Akuma realizes he is a hero and imagines he must be strong, so she hopes to have some fun. Meanwhile, her allies activate magical armors, enchanted weapons, wind, protection, and resistance to evil. Even so, the girl shows not the slightest fear. She comments that she heard about humans using magic from a distance and doesn't expect much excitement. Then she asks if they are willing to bet everything. The team shouts that the only one capable of defeating the Demon King is the hero Roman. Smiling, Akuma says there is nothing more thrilling than a good sword duel. She remembers the fight against Ryo and admits it was quite fun. Confident, she states that she is fully prepared. Without wasting time, Roman charges at high speed towards her. He attacks with a precise strike from his great sword. However, Akuma is even faster and easily dodges. Still, the blonde does not back down and begins an intense sequence of attacks. His movements are so fast and precise that it's hard to keep up, yet Akuma is not hit by a single blow. In fact, she barely moves to escape the onslaught. Then, the horned girl extends her hand and notices the constant exchange between defense and attack. Meanwhile, the team merely watches from a distance, aware that this fight is solely Roman's. Without moving from his spot, Akuma strikes him in the abdomen with the gigantic sword on the right side, making it clear how boring that was. With intense pain, the blonde falls to the ground, defeated. Still, she says he is free to attack her, but warns that she will retaliate. Soon after, the demon girl walks over to the altar while the group helps Roman recover. There, Akuma gets excited upon seeing a beautiful orb. The fight was dull, but at least this was worth it. Almost out of strength, the blonde asks the Demon King to wait a minute. Then, she explains that she is neither a lord nor anything like that, although Roman says that makes no sense. After all, with so much power, if she is not what he is looking for, what else could she be? Bored, Akuma insists she is not the Demon King and says that if they join forces, they might be able to defeat the big guy. Moreover, she comments that there are humans as strong as her and introduces herself as Leonore, since she is not in her full demon form. Then she suggests that the blonde try to become the strongest among humans. After all, he is a hero and would need to be at least 10,000 times more powerful. Tired, Roman comments on the existence of someone stronger than him. Meanwhile, in Lune, Hugh warns that the food and drink are ready, but caution is needed. Relieved, he shows happiness that Abel has returned unharmed, as he thought the boy had disappeared forever. Suddenly, he grabs Ryo by the arms and asks what the hell he was thinking entering the dungeon alone. Right after, Arthur asks Hugh not to be so harsh, since without the boy, no one would have returned, and then explains the whole situation. Thus the two head to the tent to talk better, while the young man feels relieved to have been saved by Arthur. Surprised, Hugh asks if the demons were the same as in the temple stories. The bearded man confirms and says that 50 of them appeared, along with 3 much stronger ones and even a demon prince. In shock, the other old man can hardly believe that. Even so, everyone survived. Then, he comments that it was kind of rude. After all, Arthur, Abel, and the others were there, but the bearded man assures that everyone is fine. Still, the young leader was almost destroyed, and if Ryo hadn't shown up, everything would have turned to ashes as the boy appeared on the 40th floor. Hugh says how absurd that is, as Arthur's team has the best water magic users. Even so, none of them could go straight there, not even earth mages, since the dungeon's walls and floor regenerate. Thoughtful, Arthur wonders what Ryo really is, but the other only knows that he brought Abel back from the Devil's Mountain. At that moment, the bearded man states that the kid is frighteningly strong enough to defeat the demon prince in an instant. Moreover, he says that the boy even defeated 3 of the monster's servants with a single blow, at the same time. Therefore, Arthur thinks it's better for Ryo to maintain a good relationship with Abel, preventing him from becoming hostile in the future. Still, if foolish nobles decide to mess with the young man, that could become a big problem, so he decides not to record everything about the fight. Meanwhile, our hero only thinks about filling his belly with curry, but upon entering the restaurant, he notices Sarah sitting at the back. Then, Ryo greets the elf and comments that he came in because of the delicious smell. She replies that the best curry in Lune is served there. Soon after, they place their order at the counter, and both choose a dish with medium spiciness. At that moment, Sarah explains that elves have a fast metabolism, so it's not gluttony. Ryo just laughs, not understanding the reason for the explanation. Curious, she asks where the protagonist is living, and he tells her that he is staying at the Adventurers Guild. She comments that only D-rank adventurers or higher can use the library. Then, Ryo explains that he was registered as D, which impresses Sarah since he seems strong. He says it's the first time someone has said that, and the elf replies that people don't know anything. Soon after, the dishes arrive, leaving the boy amazed. Then he comments that Sarah is an adventurer, but he doesn't see her in the guild, and she explains that she has been traveling to the royal capital on a long mission. Finally, she tells him that she is a fencing instructor and that, despite her appearance, she is strong, as her job requires living near the feudal lord's mansion. Then, she asks if Ryo has plans afterward. But he says no, just to continue with his alchemy research. Soon after, Sarah realizes how focused the boy is on creating golems. Then, the pointy-eared elf asks for a friendly battle against him. She feels that her fighting spirit has not yet been unleashed, and Rio imagines that this comes from the confrontation with the demon prince. In her workplace, there are training areas with magical barriers where no one gets hurt for real. Excited, the boy agrees without a second thought. Shortly after a brief walk, they arrive at the enormous real training field. A man hands a guild card to Rio, and the two enter, while Sarah explains that all weapons have blind spots. Confused, the adventurer asks why to use equipment if he is a mage. She replies that she knows Rio mixes equipment and magic, just like her. Then she asks if he is ready, and he confirms. In the next instant, Sarah simply disappears. It's an absurdly fast lunge, requiring immediate reaction. Even so, Rio dodges with ease. When he tries to counterattack, she retreats with 3 jumps back. Excited, Sarah says he is amazing. With the same enthusiasm, Rio comments on how fast she is. Even so, he managed to avoid the strike, showing experience against quick attacks. Without wasting time, she accelerates even more, and advances with a horizontal strike using all her strength. For a moment, the elf is barely visible due to her speed. The attacks continue without pause, precise and heavy. Even so, Rio manages to dodge them all. She is slightly faster but less powerful than his master sword, and the training equipment wouldn't withstand much. The boy realizes she uses wind magic. Every body movement is calculated to the extreme. Even without noticing, Sarah conjures magic naturally, and defeating her would require an uncommon tactic. Focused, she combines wind and sword, making the strikes even heavier, even more than Leonore's. Faced with this, Rio accepts defeat. Soon after, the elf hugs him excitedly and says it was amazing, leaving the boy blushing. She praises his resistance to the wind attacks and the absurd defense of the armor, not understanding how he endured. Rio says he loved the fight and explains that he was trained by the chief who gave him that outfit. Surprised, Sarah comments about the fairy king teaching fencing, and Rio asks how she knows that. Then she explains that elves are half fairies, which is why she recognized the clothing and concluded that the fairy king likes him a lot. As an instructor, learning swordsmanship from the king instead of magic seems surreal. Curious, Rio asks if that is so strange, and she replies that he is a legendary figure. At that moment, a woman calls Sarah saying it's time for Alfonso's training. The elf apologizes, says she needs to work, while Rio is confused about who this person is. She explains that Alfonso is the grandson of the feudal lord, will come of age this year and take on a position, but he doesn't fight well. Moreover, she warned the lord that if anything bad happens during training, she herself would kill the boy. Before leaving, Sarah tells the woman that Rio is a special friend and asks her to take him to the exit carefully. The woman panics, starting to treat the boy with extreme care while he doesn't understand anything. As they walk out of the training school, someone recognizes Rio. It's Hugh, saying he will accompany the boy from there. He thanks the woman, who runs to inform Sarah about this. Soon after, the two get into the carriage, and Hugh says he needs to talk about the previous day, leaving Rio tense. Then, he explains that there's no reason for concern, as he heard everything from Arthur. According to him, without Rio, no one would have survived. Grateful, Hugh says this openly, but the boy replies that he didn't do anything special. The man comments that Rio has already saved Abel twice, but entering without permission was not right, and there will be a penalty. Then he explains that he will receive a mission since he has never acted on the surface. There's no urgency. It will only be 3 jobs every 3 months, and the young man can choose. Rio thinks the punishment is too light, and Hugh just asks what he was doing on the feudal lord's lands. The hero explains that he was in a friendly battle. Desperate, Hugh imagines that he might have destroyed the place, but Rio assures him that everything is fine. Meanwhile, elsewhere, 2 people are battling intensely. Several precise blows are exchanged between them. Now, we are on the outskirts of the imperial capital in the Debuhi Empire, where the 3rd magical training is taking place. There is Jürgen Kirchhoff, assistant to Oscar. At the same time, Fiona's assistant is Marie. Fiona Rubin Bornemisa is the captain of the Imperial Mages Order. Oscar Luska holds the position of vice commander of the order. Confident, Fiona comments that everyone has evolved a lot in the last 6 months. Even so, Oscar says that, adding everything up, they still amount to only 4 companies. At this rate, he wonders how long it will take for them to reach the level of a division, but for now, the training ends. Suddenly, someone in the field sits on the ground and is nearly hit by a huge lightning bolt. Without hesitation, Oscar warns never to let their guard down just because the fight is over. Just when it ends is the moment of greatest attention. Next come the words of the division commander. He praises the overall progress since the last training, but makes it clear that it is still not enough for approval tomorrow. By orders of the Emperor, Oscar and Fiona will depart for Whitnash, a city in the Kingdom of Nightly. When they return, in 2 months, they will reassess the training, hoping for great advances. Someone comments on the guy who sat at the end of the battle, thinking he would be incinerated. Still, they say the vice commander was kind today. Before that, someone did the same and came out with legs pierced by fire arrows. Determined, they decide to keep training to survive. Even so, doubt arises about how strong the vice commander really is. Soon everyone agrees that, even with the whole division, they would be massacred. No one comes close to his level, and the nickname Infernal Mage does not exist for nothing. Meanwhile, Fiona comments that the trip will not be short. Oscar remembers it has been. About 5 years since the last trip to the port of Whitnash, it was decided that Conrad, the older brother of the young man, will go as a representative. Still, no one understands why the Imperial Majesty wants Oscar present as well. Fiona corrects him, saying that the correct term is Your Highness, but the blonde hates that. He explains that he understands nothing of politics, he is just a mage. Now he will be surrounded by nobles and aristocrats for 2 months. He comments that he needs to relearn how to speak formally. On the other hand, Fiona says the royal family is already used to it. Oscar sighs, saying he spoke better in the past and does not understand the Emperor's intentions. He suspects that the Majesty plans something dark while the princess is away. Rupert VI has 3 princes and 11 princesses. Even so, Fiona is considered the most beautiful. She rarely appears in public, always training magic and sword. She carries the Blade of Raven, a gift from her father. Her total focus is to restore order. This order was previously only ceremonial, made up of retired veteran mages. It existed for 200 years, until Fiona took command. Upon arriving, she dismissed everyone and transformed the group into a battle-ready force. They are strong, but few. Still, the princess leads because she possesses an extraordinary power. She masters fire for attack and light for healing perfectly. Her father's love for her is evident. That is why Oscar knows the Emperor would do anything to spare her from disturbing scenes, such as, for example, the execution of traitorous nobles. Niels' team dines cheerfully. Commenting on the first escort job, Rio says the boy will soon be exhausted with so much excitement. Soon after, Eto comments she is relieved to have the protagonist with them this time. He replies that it is his first time acting with other guild members. As long as they follow the advice given by Abel the day before, everything will go well. After all, leading a rank B team requires a lot of experience. The night before, Abel explained that 10 people were assigned to the escort. This means protecting 5 carriages in total. With that, Rio realizes there will be no rest during the trip. Still, the leader knows the boy does not tire easily. The strategist comments that the formation depends on the members he takes into account who attacks from a distance, like mages and priests. This time, they will also count on DeLong, a very experienced adventurer. Therefore, it is better to let him make certain decisions. As they walk, Rio asks if Room 10 is really a good name for such a small group. Niels replies that yes, since there are almost no rules for names, as long as they are not offensive, everything is allowed. There are much worse names out there. As they turn the corner, a man with glasses approaches them. He says they must be the adventurers responsible for the escort. His name is Hugo, the mission coordinator. Room 10 will work alongside the coffee team. They are led by DeLong, a rank D adventurer. Hugo says he has heard many good things about them through Abel. Excited, he states he is looking forward to working together. Finally, he explains that the group of merchants will head to the port of Whitnash, at the far end of the Kingdom of Nightly. It will take 2 days to arrive. They will spend 9 there and 2 more on the way back, totaling 13 days. Something unusual, so the payment will be higher. Normally, missions like this do not last that long, but during the escort, they can do whatever they want, which makes it quite relaxed. For this reason, even rank D or E adventurers can participate. The Room 10 team was lucky to get the request, and Rio only joined because he wanted to eat seafood after such a long time. Soon after, DeLong asks the boy to stay with Gunn and John in the back wagon. Then, the long journey begins. On the way, one of the men asks if Rio is a mage, and he replies that he uses the water element. Then, Gunn comments that this is rare, as he didn't know anyone like that in Lune. Water and shadows are uncommon attributes, which explains why he has never met someone similar. The dark-haired boy says he has heard great things about Rio, and John agrees. They mention that Abel is a good person and suggest inviting him for lunch one day. The escort will coincide with the port opening festival, which happens every 5 years and lasts a week. In other words, they will be there for the entire event. It's a huge festival, full of attractions and visitors from all over the world. While they are there, the team will be able to enjoy a lot. The road between Lun and Whitnash is safe, with constant patrols, so thieves hardly appear. Long jobs like this are not popular, as adventurers usually rent houses, and that would be expensive. Since Rio and the others live in the dormitory, this is not a problem. Meanwhile, the coffee team shares a house among 6 people. Curious, Rio asks where the group's name comes from, which sounds like a coffee maker. DeLong explains that it's because of the name itself, similar to a famous brand. Moreover, his grandfather was also an adventurer and used the same name for the group. Incredibly, the old man was named DeLonga. Since being reborn in Phi, Rio hasn't had any coffee. The next day, Niels notices something strange up ahead. DeLong comments that it must be the blacksmiths from a well-known team, fixing a damaged wagon. They belong to a rank D group from Lun called Let's All Become Blacksmiths. One of them asks if everyone is heading to Whitnash. Another comments that an amazing ship is about to set sail from there and that everyone should see it. The 5 are guild adventurers, 4 blacksmiths and 1 priest. Despite the strange composition, their forging skills are excellent. They noticed a problem with one of the carriage's wheels and decided to help, as they love this kind of work. Much of the good-heartedness of Lun's adventurers exists thanks to Abel. Sometime later, the escort team arrives at their destination without difficulties. They soon enter the place where they will be staying for 10 days. Niels and the others share a room for 4 people. The 2-day trip was smooth and successful. The ships are already crowding the port of beautiful Whitnash. Grateful, Niels celebrates their safe arrival and suggests going out to find something to eat. Rio, of course, gets excited. Delighted, the boy observes his plate of fish with potatoes. Amon comments that his dumpling is filled with shrimp. Niels says that the grilled mini kraken is addictive because of the sweet sauce. The next day, a problem arises with a carriage trying to enter the port city. A man named Rand apologizes to the Majesty, explaining that a vehicle from the Kingdom of Kufaris entered first and blocked the procedures. Conrad, the 3rd Imperial Prince, says that this is not their problem and that they just have to wait. He also comments that the smell of the sea is nostalgic. He says he wishes his kingdom had access to the ocean and would even consider conquering it, but it would be complicated. Then, Rand informs that he will go straight to the feudal lord's mansion. Conrad adds that he has a meeting shortly after. The servant also mentions that there will be a banquet hosted by the feudal lord. Hours later, the young man apologizes to Fiona, as he knows she is not used to these events and must be exhausted. The princess tells him not to worry. He replies that she can leave whenever she wants, as she needs to rest for the next day. In the room, the maid Marie comments that Fiona has been a bit harsh in her behavior. The princess responds that she is just very tired. She thanks Conrad for being kind enough to let her go early. This kind of environment is still strange for her. Fiona feels that her position in the delegation is a burden. As a member of the royal family, her name comes right after her older brother. Someone like that needs to measure every word. Any phrase can sound like a promise and bring consequences. Marie comments that despite this, the princess's skills with magic and sword are unmatched. The next day, the port festival begins, and the city is in celebration. Watching the crowd, Rio spots Abel among the VIP guests. And then, Amon comments that the woman next to him is beautiful, while Ito explains that she is the imperial princess, totally out of Nils's reach. The boy would even like to win her over, but first, he would have to defeat the leader, something simply impossible. Soon after, Abel's team appears, saying that he is representing the Loon Guild just for today. Being a rank B team means taking on this role sometimes when the boss is not present, and Neil says that the leader is really nice. In fact, his real intention must be to distance them from the magic court and the missions in the dungeon after what happened last time. This sounds almost like revenge against Ilarion, from the royal capital, who sent the letter for the Crimson Blade to enter the dungeon. After almost losing such important allies, it's obvious that someone would want to exchange a few words with him. While observing, the teams notice a wind barrier separating the VIPs, similar to the defense used by wyverns. Attentive, Rhea comments that the nobles of Whitnash possess an ancestral treasure capable of creating a wind defense. Lynn adds that this consumes a lot of energy, so it's not used all the time. But with the prince and princess there, it's necessary. If something like a terrorist attack were to happen, it would be a complete disaster, possibly starting a worldwide war. Moreover, the vice-captain of the Imperial Magic Order is also present. Curious, Rio asks if this vice is problematic, and the girl explains that he is known as the Infernal Mage. They say he has burned entire kingdoms with a breath and exploded a wyvern with a single attack. It might be an exaggeration, but no one seems willing to test it. Amun doesn't believe much in it, but Rhea insists that if it's true, it's better to keep a distance. Rio finds the title amazing, but soon Lin says goodbye, saying they will go get something to eat. As he walks, the boy accidentally bumps into the vice captain, who quickly apologizes. A young man comments that he needs to deliver an intact package to the captain, and the vice says he doesn't handle crowds well. Another adds that even sitting in the VIP area, the vice commander couldn't get food and might end up crying. The blonde replies that she wouldn't cry over something like that, and they continue walking while the boy comments on everything they bought. He still asks to keep the package warm, but warming food for the infernal mage would be trivial. Only Princess Fiona would dare to ask for something like that. In the VIP area, Conrad recognizes Abel, who explains he is there representing the guild for a few days. He comments that the real master only arrives later. Apparently, there will be private meetings from the 2nd to the 6th day, and the prince agrees. He says it's not every day that representatives, guild leaders, and local lords gather. His schedule is full. Conrad mentions that his younger sister is also present. Abel says he saw the princess among the honorable guests. Fiona, Imperial Commander. The prince asks if that title is a problem, but Abel replies that it only means the infernal mage is nearby. Quickly, the noble cuts him off, saying that this is military secret, and says goodbye. Oscar's presence cannot be discussed. Everything there involves strategy and political maneuvering. Abel realizes that Conrad is a tough opponent. These situations are not simple for him. Meanwhile, Fiona is sprawled on the bed, completely exhausted. The maid complains that this is the 2nd time this has happened. The princess replies that acting like a noble is more tiring than any training. The woman comments that there is always someone watching in the division. Fiona explains that family is not the problem, but strangers are. At least her outfit helps, being functional and comfortable. Soon after, 2 nobles knock on the door, saying they are also tired. The infernal mage comments that he doesn't handle large crowds well. He almost bumped into someone and dropped the food. The strangest part is that he didn't dodge. It was the other person who reacted too quickly. This draws attention, as it's too much skill for a mere adventurer. On the 2nd day of the festival, Niels comments that the boat is beautiful. It has neither sails nor oars. Someone explains that it moves using wind and water magic, probably through magical stones. The following afternoon, the VIPs will be able to board. In the morning, the 30th double circuit event takes place, with forbidden magic at the start. In the second half, everything is released, so endurance is essential. Niels wants to participate. After all, the prize is 300,000 florins. He and Aman run to sign up. Money really works miracles. There is also a target shooting championship at sea. The problem is that the group has no archers. Rio comments that Abel uses a bow like a professional. At that moment, he himself appears, saying they are exaggerating. And now that the guild master has arrived, Abel is free to do as he pleases, like savoring a mini-grilled kraken. Soon after, the protagonist suggests that Abel pays for everyone to shoot, but the leader isn't excited about the idea. Participation costs 50 florins, and hitting the farthest target earns 5,000. Rio admits he has never trained archery, so he passes his turn to Niels. At that moment, Abel starts laughing, saying the boy reminds him a lot of himself in the past. When one becomes an adventurer, one can no longer act as before. That's why, upon realizing that the team had no archer, he decided to train on his own. Then it's his turn. Abel looks calmly, leaving everyone tense. As expected, the arrow hits the center of the target. The crowd cheers, praises the feat, and celebrates the prize of 5,000 florins. Soon after, the rest of the Crimson Blade appears, commenting that the leader is finally free. Lin says that Ria is in a bad mood because Abel hasn't spent time with them. Rio thanks for being able to see that demonstration and says goodbye, heading to room 10. Niels comments on how cool that was. Amon jokes that Ria is a goddess, and maybe he should learn archery too. As night falls, a silhouette jumps from rooftop to rooftop. A voice asks if everything is all right. Another replies that yes, from the 4th day everything works. On the last day, there will be more people and a party in the Lord's mansion garden. The mysterious figure comments that this is convenient, so it will be on that day. The next day, Niels asks a big guy what he is doing there. The other returns the question impatiently. Eto and Rio notice the strange atmosphere. The girl explains that this is Dan. The protagonist remembers having seen him before. He recalls a girl in the group whom Dan helped on another occasion. It was Sasha, from room 2. Eto knows her, as they are both priests. She must be around 16 and is quite skilled. The girl continues explaining that Sasha joined Dan's group. This was great, as the team didn't have a priest. Meanwhile, 2 boats at a time position themselves for the tournament. Each has 4 oars. The rule is simple: go around the buoy and come back. Attacking other boats is allowed, magic is prohibited, but equipment is allowed. The event has existed for 150 years and is extremely popular. Niels and Amon are in the 4th boat. With seconds to go before the start, both prepare. Soon after, the signal is given and everyone shoots out to sea. In moments, a boat capsizes, sending the audience into a frenzy. Startled, someone comments that it's a good thing they didn't enter just for the money. Ryo observes that the strength of that group was not enough. In the VIP area, Fiona comments that the test is difficult because it doesn't allow magic. Oscar replies that if it were allowed, everything would end quickly. She retorts that not everyone is as strong as he is. The blonde counters that the result would be the same if the captain attacked. The maid observes that the princess liked the crepe so much that she is eating another. Excited, Fiona says it's delicious and wishes for something like that in the training field. The infernal mage grumbles that sweets are not part of the cafeteria menu. She asks for at least that in the castle. He replies that there are already many good foods there. Meanwhile, at sea, Dan's group faces Niels and Eamon. The blonde demonstrates absurd strength and precision. They exchange blows while Eamon rows. Rio comments on how well the two fight even in the water. Ito responds that this defines a true swordsman. The oars clash forcefully, while the audience cheers. Suddenly, both break in half. Even so, the fight continues with brute force. Niels refuses to lose, and Dan thinks the same. The winning boat has already passed the buoy. Maybe they could still come in second, but then the boats split in half. The four fall into the sea and end up disqualified. In the afternoon during the ceremonial trip, many people watch the huge boat. Hugh asks why Rio and the others chose that spot. The boy replies that it's the best seat. Curious, the old man questions what Niels is staring at so intently, even drooling. Ito comments on the princess present, something that could cause an international incident. She says she must be protected by the infernal mage. Hugh confirms, explaining that it is Oscar Luska, an adventurer who rose from the common folk to nobility thanks to his own achievements. As expected, the ship is stunning and glides smoothly through the waters. The old man comments that it costs around 370 billion florins. We have reached the fourth day of the opening festival. This time, Room 10 finds a rare shop specializing in bows and arrows. The group enters curiously, observing each displayed item. As predicted, Eto is completely enchanted. Thoughtfully, she wonders if it wouldn't be more useful in combat using one of those crossbows. Fighting up close is complicated, and offensive magic ends up being limited. Therefore, long-distance attacks are ideal, although mastering a bow takes time. Still, it serves as a great tactic to disrupt the enemy. The constant threat leaves anyone paranoid and breaks concentration. At that moment, the seller asks if the two are looking for a crossbow. He comments that it would be perfect for a priest. His name is Abraham Louis, and Eto asks if it's difficult to adapt to using it. Smiling, the mustached man says he just finished an ideal prototype. Then, he takes everyone to the back of the shop. There is a shooting range, created to test the equipment. Delighted, Ito comments that this is exactly what one expects from a specialized store. The old man presents a finished rapid-fire model from that morning. Just slot in the arrows, which are fired at high speed. Pulling the lever, the string automatically draws back and positions the projectile. Abraham shoots straight at the center of the target and says the range is about 15 meters. With each perfect shot, Eto becomes even more impressed. Excited, she asks the price. The shopkeeper explains that, being a newly finished prototype, it costs 80,000 florins. Without hesitation, the priestess agrees. Niels nudges her and reminds her that the purchase is for the team. Thus, the cost will be divided among everyone. 20,000 per person seems fair, especially with the leader able to charge able later. Meanwhile, Rio asks if the store also makes watches. Abraham replies that it's just a hobby. Curious, the boy asks if they are made with alchemy. The old man confirms and begins to explain each mechanism with enthusiasm. On the fifth day of the festival, Rio notices something different. He comments on people making repairs on the road to Whitnash. Niels recognizes the group. They are the same as before. It's the rank D team. Let's all become blacksmiths, Eamon says. This explains the impeccable service. Even so, Rio still finds the group's name strange. The boy with the bob haircut comments that they are real blacksmiths. Niels adds that, being adventurers, they must be even more skilled. According to DeLong, everyone is on the front line, except for the priest. Rio notes that everyone is very strong. On the sixth day, the four practically just ate non-stop. On the last day, Eto comments that they didn't stop by the Adventurers Guild. Although it's not mandatory, it's something important. If they want to accept missions in the city, registration avoids problems. Then the leader suggests a quick visit, just to check everything. After that, they would return to enjoying the food. Upon arrival, everyone is impressed by the huge building. The guild is packed because of the festival. And as expected, Niels gets into trouble with Dan. Meanwhile, Eto greets Sasha, saying it's been a while since the last time. Shortly after, an old man comments on the boat race and invites the two to drink. He also says that, during the festival, adventurers can eat and drink freely. Rio praises the fish soup, and soon several around agree. While the atmosphere is light, two mysterious men talk in a corner. One asks if they can proceed with the plan. The other questions if anyone went to the mansion. In response, they say that the guildmaster of Lun has left. He's probably at the garden party. Without further delay, they decide to continue with the plan. And definitely, this doesn't seem good at all. So the video ends here. If you don't want to miss the next part, activate the notification bell, and see you next time.